Chapter 336. As soon as the words life and death duel came out of Su Hongyi's mouth, it was as if he had been injected with chicken blood. His face instantly became much rosier. Based on his reaction, it was not difficult to see that he was very excited. His blood was boiling, and he was inexplicably excited. In fact, this matter was not that big of a deal. Because Qin Xueqing's family was the backbone of the Wu Lian people, Mr. Chen's name had long been known throughout the Wu Lian people. The Wu Lian people were respected by martial arts. Su Feng, who was also above the heavenly man level, was naturally eager to prove his strength. Mr. Chen naturally became Su Feng's best choice. As long as he defeated Chen Shi in public, Su Feng's status in the Wu Lian people would naturally skyrocket. He could even leap to become a giant who had the right to speak within the Wu Lian people. As the saying went, in a mediocre life, fame and fortune were just worldly possessions. But since ancient times, how many people could be exempt from this custom? Su Feng had descendants and apprentices. Even if it was not for himself, he had to think about his apprentices and apprentices. He had to leave his own legacy in Huaxia. But Chen Shi and Su Feng were different. In this world, there were only a few people that Chen Shi really cared about. He was like a wanderer wandering between two worlds. Wherever there was a home, that was where he belonged. Yingying and Nianyan were on Earth, so Earth was his home. As for his legacy, wasn't Nianyan his legacy? It was enough to have such a well-behaved, smart, and sensible daughter. Old Gu was just an ordinary person. In addition, he was old, so it was normal for him to have blurred vision. Therefore, the old man did not hear Su Hongyi shout. But just by looking at Su Hongyi's posture, Old Gu knew that this junior was not saying anything good. Therefore, when Chen Shi returned to the tea house and sat down, Old Gu could not wait to ask, "Little Chen, who is that outside?" "He's a former colleague of the company. Now that the company's performance is not good, the board of directors wants to invite me back, so they sent him to persuade me." "Lobbyist?" Hearing this, Gu Lao frowned and looked out the window. Then he asked doubtfully, "But from the way I see it, he doesn't look like he's here to be a lobbyist. He looks like he's here to cause trouble." "That's normal. If I go back, won't he have another competitor for no reason? Of course he doesn't want me to go back." After hearing Chen Shi's words, Gu Lao's face suddenly showed an expression of realization. Then he nodded and said, "That's true. I see that you are doing well as the owner of a small tea house, so it's better not to go back. It will be troublesome." "You're right." Chen Shi and Gu Lao were chatting in the tea house. Outside the house, after Su Hongyi shouted, he stood still and waited for Chen Shi's reply. However, Chen Shi did not give any response. After a full 10 minutes, Ding Qingji finally couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Young Master Su, you see, Mr. Chen hasn't given a definite answer. This matter, why don't we just leave it at that?" "Ha!" Hearing this, Su Hongyi suddenly let out a sneer, then immediately shouted at the tea house again, "Mr. Chen, I have delivered your message, and the letter of challenge has also been handed over to Director Ding to notarize. My father will be waiting for you at the peak of Taihang in 3 days. This battle will be watched by the world. I hope you won't miss the appointment, so as not to become a laughingstock. You're the most elegant person in Huaxia, so I'm sure you won't back down. If that's the case, I'll take my leave first." After that, Su Hongyi bowed to the tea house, then got in the car and left. From beginning to end, Chen Shi did not give any response. However, after hearing Su Hongyi's last sentence, Chen Shi couldn't help but sneer. He was being ridden on top of his head. Night. The early summer night didn't have the irritability of the day, and the sudden breeze even seeped in a slight chill. The smog in Shangjing had always been very serious, but today, it sprinkled a little bit of starlight for the first time. After the little girl finished washing up, she lay on the windowsill and looked at the stars for a while, then played with Big Head for a while. Only then did she reluctantly climb into bed under Chen Shi's repeated requests. According to the usual rhythm, Chen Shi would tell her 1 or 2 short stories, and then this little thing would fall into a deep sleep. But today, for some reason, after Chen Shi told her 2 short bedtime stories, this little thing was still very energetic, and kept crawling on Chen Shi and Qin Ruoying. Chen Shi had no choice but to hold her in his arms, and then gently persuade her. Nian Nian, be good, it's already 12 o'clock, you should rest early, and have enough energy to play tomorrow, okay? Hearing this little thing pouted and said coquettishly, I don't want to sleep. Then what do you want to do? I don't know. The little thing shook her head blankly. But then, as if she suddenly thought of something, she quickly turned her head to the end of the bed and shouted, Big Cat! Big Cat! Come here! Big Cat was lying in the corner with its eyes closed, and after hearing the little thing shout, it quickly jumped onto the bed. Meow. Just as Big Cat meowed, the little thing hugged it in her arms, and then put it on the pillow next to her. Big Cat, it's cold outside, don't run outside, sleep with me. I'll cover you with a quilt. As she spoke, the little thing grabbed the cold quilt, and then, like Qin Ruoying, gently covered the big cat with the quilt. Meow. Big Cat lay on the bed and looked at the little thing with a confused expression. After this period of cultivation, it had reached the peak of wisdom, and could break through at any time. So even Chen-Shi did not force it to play with the little thing recently. But today this little thing did not know what was wrong with it. In the middle of the night, instead of sleeping, it came to ask it to sleep. Did it still need to sleep? Big Cat was wondering if it should escape, but after the little thing covered it with the quilt, she gently put her little hand on it, and then imitated Qin Ruoying's tone and said, Big Cat, be good, you're the youngest, I want to take care of you, when you fall asleep, I'll sleep. These were the words Qin Ruoying usually said to her. Who would have thought that this little thing would actually apply what she learned? So, she had learned to care for others now? This was a good thing, so naturally, he would encourage her. Therefore, after Chen-Shi glared fiercely at the big cat, it reluctantly closed its eyes, curled up into a ball next to the little thing, and pretended to be asleep. The little thing waited for a while, and when she thought that it was really asleep, she carefully covered the big cat with the quilt, and then obediently lay back on the bed. I'm going to sleep. Perhaps because she had experienced the joy of taking care of others, the little thing lowered her voice and said such a sentence, and was no longer naughty, but obediently closed her eyes and fell asleep. Looking at her very loving action, the couple's faces could not help but evoke a trace of a smile. It was only after the little fellow had truly fallen asleep that the day was truly over. And at this time, Qin Ruoying looked at Chen-Shi and asked softly, Today's matter? What do you think? Obviously, she also heard Su Hongyi's words. Qin Ruoying was very clear about Chen-Shi's strength, and naturally, she was not worried about Chen-Shi's safety, so she was just casually asking. Anyway, no matter what decision Chen-Shi made, she would support it. I heard that the scenery at the top of Taihang Mountain is not bad. Why don't we take Nian Nian there to see the scenery? I think that's a good idea. Then it's settled. Okay. In a few words, the couple settled this matter, and then began to discuss how to arrange the itinerary. As for Su Feng's challenge. Chapter 337. Going north to the Taihang Mountains, how difficult is it? Sheep intestines are twisted, the wheels are destroyed. How bleak are the trees, the north wind is mournful. Cao Cao's poem, Journey of the Bitter Cold, described the magnificence of the Taihang Mountains. The Taihang Mountains started north from Shangjing and extended south to Jinzhou. The 800 miles of Taihang spanned across 4 provinces. It could be said to be vast and majestic. Because of the direction of the mountains, the Taihang Mountains were higher in the north and higher in the south. The peaks were mainly concentrated in Jizhou, not far from Shangjing. It was also because of the towering peaks in the north of Taihang that it formed a completely different landscape from the south. In the depths of the mountains, one could see cliffs that looked like they were carved by knives and axes, deep and narrow canyons and winding rivers. The road wound up the steep cliffs, going round and round, and gradually disappeared into the clouds. Looking down through the car window, one could see the erratic clouds in the mountains, and the lush greenery that even the fog couldn't cover. Layers of green forest, enchanting wilderness. The little girl didn't like to sit in a car because it always gave her a feeling of suffocation. Therefore, compared to a car, the little girl preferred to sit in a bus. After all, the bus was spacious and had a wide view. Sitting in the bus, one could see the beautiful scenery of the mountains. Today they were hiking, so Qin Ruoying gave the little girl a set of children's sports clothes. Her hair was tied up in a bun, revealing a round and rosy little face. She looked particularly lively and cute. Click, click, click. The little girl sat on Qin Ruoying's lap and took pictures with her mobile phone. But she didn't have a sense of beauty, so she just took pictures for fun. As long as she heard the click-click sound of the phone, the little girl couldn't help but giggle. Come to think of it, only a child's laughter could be so innocent and crisp. She came out to play for fun, and her laughter seemed to have a strange magic that could infect the people around her. As long as he heard her crisp laughter, he would feel like he had really escaped from the city, put aside his work and worries, and enjoyed life with a natural state of mind. Therefore, even though this little thing kept on making noises throughout the journey, the other passengers in the carriage didn't find her too noisy. Instead, they would turn back to look at the couple from time to time. They didn't hide the envy in their hearts at all, and kept on praising this child for being so cute. It was May 24th, Wednesday. It was an ordinary Wednesday. Because it was a working day, at least 1/3 of the seats on the bus were empty. The Taihang Mountains were very long. Basically, every province had its own scenic spots. The scenic spot where Chunxi's family was now was the one with the highest elevation among the many scenic spots, Xiaowutai Mountain Scenic Spot. Originally, they wanted to go to the highest east stage to see the scenery. However, when they came here, they heard from the management staff of the scenic spot that because of the heavy rain a few days ago, there were mudslides and landslides on the road to the east stage. Therefore, the east stage was temporarily closed. With no other choice, Chunxi and his family could only depart from the Red Cliff Castle and follow the winding mountain path to the North Terrace, which was slightly lower than the East Terrace. They planned to camp in the North Terrace for the night before returning home. They were traveling, so naturally they couldn't be in a hurry. The Xiaowutai Mountain was very steep. It had always been called the novice training camp for mountaineers. After setting off from the Scarlet Cliff Castle, Chunxi let the little girl sit on his shoulders, and then he held Qin Ruoying's hand, and the family of 3 leisurely strolled through the lush green peaks. They walked slowly. At this speed, it would take at least 4 or 5 hours to climb the North Terrace. When Chunxi finally climbed over a mountain, the view suddenly became much wider. The little girl rode on his shoulder and looked around. She couldn't help but shout excitedly, "Papa! I like it here." Blue sky, white clouds, green mountains, green water, and golden lotus flowers all over the mountains. In front of the beautiful scenery, even an ignorant child like her couldn't help but be intoxicated. And just when the little girl was excited by the beautiful scenery in front of her, East Terrace, the peak of Taihang. The Taihang Mountains in the north were very steep. The development value was far less than the 3 mountains and 5 peaks, so there were basically no buildings on the mountain. Therefore, the most original natural scenery was maintained. After climbing over the mountain and climbing to the top, looking back at the bleak place, the clouds were thousands of miles away. The mountains were thousands of layers, the sun was shining, and everything was shining. A sense of heroism rose in the chest. It was worth the trip. Unfortunately, the road to the East Terrace had been temporarily closed. This beautiful scenery was destined to not be with Chunxi's family. Although the path up the mountain had been sealed, the peak of Taihang was currently filled with people and bustling with noise and excitement. These people were naturally not hikers who came to enjoy the scenery. As early as 3 days ago, when Su Hongyi loudly read the letter of challenge outside the tea house, the whole Huaxia was shocked. For such big news, with the usual attitude of the Wu Lian, he would definitely order a ban on it. Maintaining stability, everyone was used to it. But this time was different. The Wu Lian had no intention of blocking the news at all. Instead, he allowed it to spread throughout the country in a very short time, and even the whole world. That night, countless people couldn't sleep. Even more people rushed to Taihang Mountain overnight, wanting to be the first to occupy the best viewing position in the East Terrace, hoping to see the upcoming battle with their own eyes. If they could get some inspiration from it, how would it help their future cultivation? This battle involved 2 celestial beings. One was Mr. Chun, who rose like a comet and was directly rated X by the Wu Lian. The other was Su Feng, the leader of the Yin Ghost sect who had been in charge of the Southwest for hundreds of years. Celestial beings. A battle of life and death. What kind of grand event was this? Because Mr. Chen was too mysterious, no one knew who would win this battle. To be honest, if it weren't for the unreliable rumors that spread from time to time within the Wu Lian, no one was optimistic about Mr. Chen's victory. But he lived up to his reputation. Since the Wu Lian admired Mr. Chen so much, there must be something special about him, and his strength should not be underestimated. Therefore, this battle could be said to be the focus of the world's attention. There was an open space at the highest point of the East Terrace, with an area of about 10 square meters, which could be regarded as an excellent viewing platform. Those who came to watch the battle were not ordinary people, but they all tacitly stood at the mountainside, at least 100 meters away from the viewing platform. No one dared to take a step forward. No one dared to talk about it. Except for the sound of the wind, not even the sound of birds or insects could be heard. It was silent. All this was because there was one person sitting on the viewing platform. He would climb to the top and look down on all the other mountains, facing this magnificent and beautiful scenery of the mountain peak. This person closed his eyes tightly and sat upright like a rock on the observation platform. He didn't move at all. But there was an incomparably strong force that kept flowing out of him, like a dark cloud on a cloudy day, weighing heavily on everyone's hearts. Finally, someone couldn't bear the pressure. After retreating a few hundred meters, he let out a long sigh of relief. Looking at the mountaintop, he couldn't help but sigh. Heavenly man. Senior Su has really reached the realm of oneness of heaven and men. Senior Su has been sitting here for 3 days, but Mr. Chen hasn't shown up. Do you think? Is he arrogant, or he doesn't dare to come at all? In a battle between heavenly man and heavenly man, victory and defeat is only a hair's breadth away. The most important thing in a war is the right time, the right place, and the right people. Mr. Su has been sitting here for 3 days, and he has already familiarized himself with the surroundings. If Mr. Chen is going to fight, he should have come here in advance to familiarize himself with the place. The sun is about to set. Why hasn't he shown up yet? Could it be he really doesn't dare to come? A few peak strength warriors hid on the mountainside and whispered to each other. Su Feng's letter of challenge didn't mention a specific time for the final battle, so according to tradition, as long as the sun hadn't set, the day was not over yet. If Mr. Chen still didn't show up when the sun went down, it could be assumed that he had admitted defeat. Mr. Chen is at least above the heavenly man level. I don't think he will run away before the battle, right? Otherwise, wouldn't it be a joke to be above the heavenly man level? He shouldn't run away before the battle. Maybe Mr. Chen is delayed by something. Let's wait a little longer. Anyway, there's still some time before the sun goes down. Maybe he's already on his way. Chapter 338. Why hadn't Mr. Chen come yet? This question had become a common question in everyone's heart. Did he not dare to come? Or did he not want to come? Although this was the guess in everyone's heart, no one could give an accurate answer. Someone once said that the dignity of a celestial being was more important than life. And the so-called dignity did not simply refer to face. How much was face worth? What was really important? It was the determination to push a cultivator forward. From the moment they stepped on the path of cultivation, they were destined to compete with the heavens, with the earth, and with all living things. Even if the road ahead was difficult and dangerous, they had to cut through all obstacles and press forward. Natural selection, survival of the fittest. Only by fighting for that slim chance of survival could one shed mortality and become an immortal and live freely in the world. This battle was the focus of the world's attention, and for Su Feng, it was a matter of life and death. How could he just laugh it off? Therefore, as early as 3 days ago, Su Feng had already arrived at the peak of Taihang. Then he meditated here for 3 days, adjusting his state to the peak. Such a move not only expressed the importance he attached to this battle, but it was also a necessary tactic. The reason why Su Feng meditated here for 3 days was not because he was bored, but because he wanted his essence, energy, and spirit to be closely connected with the mountains and rivers. 3 days was enough for him to familiarize himself with the direction of every mountain peak here, the position of every tree, and even the size of every fallen rock, every flower, every leaf, every world, every blade of grass, every tree, and every bodhi. Sitting on the right time and place, Su Feng's momentum reached its peak. Before they even fought, he had already taken the lead and gained the upper hand. This was not cheating. After all, Su Feng came here after issuing the letter of challenge. Mr. Chen could do the same. The sun rose and set and rose. The whole place was silent. Only the mountain wind kept echoing. Everyone was silently waiting for that person's arrival. Finally, the sun turned to the west. It was still emitting thousands of rays of golden light, but at the same time, it was also slowly falling. The clouds next to it were dyed rose, mixed with some gold, and looked particularly beautiful and spectacular. This was a beautiful scene that belonged to the sunset. It was different from the relaxed joy of sunrise. At sunset, people seemed to be more prone to sadness. The whole world seemed to fall into darkness at any time. The day was about to end, but Mr. Chen still did not show up. Where is it? Could it be that he really didn't dare to come? Finally, Su Feng opened his eyes and silently gazed at the setting sun on the horizon. At this moment, no one knew what he was thinking. Where was Mr. Chen? Wasn't he still busy boiling water and cooking in Beitai? Since they were camping, they naturally had to bring enough equipment, so even Qin Ruoying was carrying a big backpack today. The family of 3 chose to set up camp in a leeward location. After that, Chen Shi piled up the dry branches that he had picked up along the way. Then, when the little fellow was not paying attention, he lit the firewood with a paw sound. This time, the little thing was truly overjoyed. They were going to sleep on the mountain today. The real mountains, the real wilderness. This was not a man-made campsite like the one in Forest Park. Therefore, when Chen Shi used the portable kitchen utensils to cook, the little thing was already jumping up and down excitedly. She could not help much, so Qin Ruoying asked her to wait in the tent obediently. However, the little thing could not suppress her excitement at all, and instead jumped back and forth around them. Qin Ruoying only asked if there was enough dry wood, but she actually understood. She even ran to the side of the tent and learned from Chen Shi, constantly picking up some dry branches scattered under the trees. She did not know whether these branches were suitable for firewood, so she just threw them all into the fire. If it were not for the fact that her father did not need any fuel to start a fire, this weak pile of firewood would have been smashed out by this little fellow. The conditions were limited, so Chen Shi could only make a few simple farmhouse dishes, most of which were simmering. When he was cooking, he did not forget to throw a few potatoes into the fire, ready to let the little fellow taste the taste of potatoes cooked with firewood. What was the taste of the wild? This was called the taste of the wild. Qin Ruoying spread the tablecloth outside the tent, and Chen Shi used the snack box to serve the dishes. After a while, the table was full of dishes. Looking up, the mountains in the distance were dusk, and the wilderness was quiet. The sky was the bedding, and the earth was the mat. Just like that, the family of 3 sat on the rock, facing the night breeze as they ate this not exactly exquisite but absolutely delicious camping dinner. Because the potatoes were too hot, the little fellow threw them on the ground and gently kicked them with her feet. This was the method that Chen Shi taught her, which could quickly cool the potatoes. After the potato had cooled down a little, she picked it up. She didn't care how dirty the potato skin was. After tearing it open, she began to chew on it. Papa, look, stars. Although the sun hadn't set yet, the stars were already shining in the east of the dusk. The setting sun was like fire here, and the stars were shining there. What a rare picture. The little fellow was almost stunned. Is it beautiful? Yes. Then Papa will show you a better one. After that, Chen Shi suddenly raised his right hand, and then pointed to the east with his fingers like a sword. Then a blue light suddenly rose. Like a meteor, it flashed over the little fellow's head, and then left a long shadow in the sky. Meteor. Meteor. I know. It's a meteor. The little fellow jumped up and down excitedly. Her clear and melodious voice reverberated throughout the valley, like a cheerful bird flying freely under the boundless sky. At the same time, east stage, the peak of Taihang. In fact, the sun had already set, but because of the refraction of the clouds, the afterglow of the setting sun could still be seen on the mountain, giving people the illusion that the sun had not set yet. Mr. Chen did not come after all. Even if people did not want to believe it, It was the truth. He was afraid of the battle. Many people came to watch the battle with a pilgrimage mentality, but they did not expect to see such a result in the end. This was something no one had expected. From today onwards, Mr. Chen's name would become Huaxia's biggest joke. After everyone shook their heads and sighed, they finally walked down the mountain in low spirits. Only a few people were still standing in the same place, unwilling to leave. Su Hongyi stood on a large rock closest to the observation deck. When he saw the sun sink into the mountaintop, he couldn't help but smile. From this moment on, everything was different from before. Identity, status, power, as long as he Su Hongyi wanted it. How could he not get it? This was the real. He would climb to the top and look down on all mountains. If Su Feng was not still sitting on the observation deck, Su Hongyi would have looked up to the sky and screamed to express his excitement at the moment. Su Hongyi's excitement did not last long, because there was a sudden exclamation from the crowd behind him. Look. What is that? It looks like a meteor. Bah no. It's a sword. A flying sword. It's so fast, it's coming, it's coming. The green light was so fast that it arrived in the blink of an eye. Like a meteor, it approached the east stage in an instant. Su Hongyi stared at the green light in a daze, and the smile on his face froze instantly. He's coming. Just as the sun was about to set and night was about to fall, a ray of green light streaked across the sky and shot straight to the peak of Taihang. Chapter 339. The sun had already set. Just when everyone thought that Mr. Chen was not going to show up, a green light suddenly pierced through the sky, leaped over the mountains, and headed straight for the east platform from the northwest. The green light shone like a comet. But when the green light approached the peak of Taihang, people suddenly realized, this was not a shooting star, this was a flying sword that only existed in legends. At the peak of the mountains, a sword soared to the heavens. Swoosh swoosh, a green rainbow pierced the sky. The long sword turned into a green light, and suddenly flew over from afar. Although it was not close, it vaguely gave people a huge pressure. Its momentum was so strong that it was unstoppable. The sword was 3 feet and 3 inches long, the blade was like water, and it emitted a dense chill. It was as cold as the moonlight, and as bone-chilling as a cold lake. This long sword was the magic weapon that Chen Shi had snatched from Bai Hong's hand, Flowing Cloud. Because the long sword was flying too fast, before anyone could react, the long sword had already arrived at the peak of Taihang, and the tip of the sword was pointed straight at Su Feng, who was sitting on the observation platform. Good timing. Seeing this, Su Feng let out a long howl to the sky. Then, like a giant python that had been dormant for a long time, he suddenly soared into the sky. His black robe fluttered in the wind, and for a moment, he was like a god descending to earth, facing the flying sword in the sky. However, when Su Feng soared into the sky and was ready to face the sword, he truly felt the majestic power contained in the sword. Under the sky that was not late at dusk, twilight gradually rose, and the mountain wind raged. The sword seemed to have torn the sky apart, leaving a shallow mark in the void. Wherever the long sword went, the spiritual energy at the peak of Taihang surged toward it. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth kept converging into the sword, but it gradually increased the power of the sword. In the end, this power made Su Feng feel like he was in a trance, as if he was not facing the sword, but the entire sky. The sky had collapsed. The power of this sword was so terrifying. Su Feng's face turned cold. He did not have time to think about where this flying sword came from, and he instinctively stirred up the vitality in his body. With a loud shout, 18 servants immediately appeared beside him, and formed a protective circle around him. The 18 servants took up the position of the 8 trigrams, each occupying a corner. At the same time, they continued to inject their own yin qi into Su Feng's body. In that instant, with Su Feng as the center, a shadow of the 8 trigrams suddenly appeared at the peak of Taihang, facing the green light from afar. For the past 3 days, Su Feng had been continuously absorbing the yin qi from the Taihang mountains, pushing the 18 servants to their peak condition. The vast and majestic yin qi of the mountains, as well as Su Feng's hundreds of years of hard cultivation, merged into the peak of Taixing at this moment. They slowly circulated in the void, forming an indestructible 8 trigrams formation. And this was his trump card. In Soldier's formation, move the mountains. Taking advantage of the right time, place, and people, gathering the power of the mountains, rivers, sun, moon, and yin and yang, he faced this world-shaking sword head-on. This was a powerful force that only those above the celestial being realm could control. It was also a power that ordinary people could never imagine. Therefore, no matter who won or lost in this battle, it could definitely be said to be an unprecedented battle. And the moment Su Feng revealed the Taiji diagram, the flying sword finally arrived in front of Su Feng. Like the sonic boom caused by the flight of a supersonic fighter, the moment the longsword hit the Taiji diagram, with the point of impact as the center of the circle, a burst of white air suddenly erupted, its power monstrous. The invisible air wave carried a powerful impact, instantly turning the stones on the observation deck into dust. At the same time, the air wave also uprooted all the trees on the mountain. For a moment, the peak of Taihang was filled with dust and dirt, as if it had been hit by a Force 12 typhoon. Su Hongyi was standing closest to it, so the moment the air wave hit, he was sent flying by the powerful shock wave, and then rolled along the hillside. After rolling for a few hundred meters, he finally hit a big rock and stopped. Gravel and dust constantly fell on Su Hongyi, and in a short while he was buried alive. Similar scenes kept playing out. No one had seen a battle between those above the celestial being realm, so they didn't know what the safe zone was. If it weren't for Wu Lian's consideration of not letting everyone get too close, the peak of Taihang would have been dyed red with blood today. And this was based on the situation where Su Feng flew into the sky and took the sword head-on. If Su Feng was still standing on the observation deck, this sword, wouldn't it have shaved the mountain? The lucky ones with lower cultivation were standing farther away in advance, and after the explosion, they ran faster than anyone else, so they were not injured because of this. By the time they looked at the viewing area in shock, they realized that everything had already been settled. The air wave dissipated. Su Feng was still flying in the air, but his black robe was torn to shreds by the air wave, and from afar, he looked like a rag doll. As for the Taiji diagram, it had already turned into a light smoke, dissipating at the peak of Taihang. Su Feng didn't seem to be injured. That was because the flying sword suddenly stopped in the air after breaking the Taiji diagram. The blue light around the long sword had already dissipated. If it weren't for the fact that it was still floating quietly in the air, it wouldn't have looked much different from an ordinary long sword. However, although there were no visible wounds on Su Feng's body, most of his primordial qi had been shaken away. Like an old man whose body had been hollowed out, Su Feng stared blankly at this long sword that was right in front of him. He actually couldn't maintain his high void wind resistance state, falling straight down from the sky just like that. Bang! With a muffled sound, Su Feng crashed heavily into the ground. But right after that, he crawled up from the ground shakily. Su Feng half knelt on the ground, trying to raise his head. In addition to shock, fear, there was also some disbelief in his eyes. One sword. Only one sword. He couldn't even take one sword from Mr. Chen? From beginning to end, Mr. Chen had never shown his face. With only one flying sword, he had cut off half of his cultivation, and completely turned him into a cripple. Su Feng stared blankly at the flying sword in the sky. Suddenly, the sword vibrated slightly. After seeing this scene, Su Feng suddenly felt as if he had been struck by lightning. The expression on his face suddenly became extremely nervous and frightened. So after a shudder, Su Feng suddenly lay on the ground, his forehead pressed against the soil, and shouted in a trembling voice, "Thank you, Mr. Chen, for sparing my life. Thank you, Mr. Chen, for sparing my life. Thank you, Mr. Chen, for sparing my life." After Su Feng shouted 3 times, he even raised his head and kowtowed heavily on the ground 3 times. When the few martial artists who were not affected by the blast saw this scene, they were immediately dumbfounded. Even their eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. What happened just now? Su Tianren lost, and he was so scared that he knelt down and begged for mercy? This after being stunned for a moment. A smarter guy suddenly came back to his senses and couldn't help but shout excitedly, "I understand. The reason why Chen Xian only attacked after the sun went down. That's because he didn't take Su Tianren seriously at all. Su Feng doesn't deserve to fight with him at all. Hearing this, the rest of the people suddenly had a look of realization and hurriedly nodded in agreement. Yes, that's it. But what I don't understand is, Su Tianren is also above the celestial being level, but he couldn't even take one sword from Mr. Chun then. What realm should Mr. Chun be in? No one could answer this question. Everyone looked at the sky again. After Su Feng kowtowed 3 times, the sword turned into a green light again and flew back along the way it came. In the blink of an eye, it completely disappeared into the horizon. The mountain wind was still whistling. But in the blink of an eye, the peak of Taihang had completely changed. Chapter 340. The farce finally came to an end. In fact, whether it was Su Feng or the onlookers present, any thoughts or opinions of them were meaningless to Chen Shi. The reason why he showed off his skills today was mainly to remind Wu Lian. What you saw was only a part of me. From beginning to end, Wu Lian had never really understood Chen Shi. As for the others, if it weren't for Chen Shi's photographic memory, he probably wouldn't even remember the names of Su Feng and Su Hongyi, let alone the others. Anyway, no matter who or what, in short, there was only one sentence: I didn't care. There was a lot of noise in the east platform, but the north platform was still a peaceful scene in the mountains. The night breeze was gentle, and the stars were twinkling. This time, Chen Shi had specially brought a skylight tent. The whole family lay in the tent and looked up at the bright starry sky. That warm and comfortable feeling made the little guy let out comfortable moans through his nose. She didn't want to say anything. She just kept climbing up and down on Chen Shi and Qin Ruoying, using her parents' bodies as a cushion. It was soft and very comfortable. The next morning, when the sun just peeked out from the top of the mountain in the distance, the little girl yawned and got out of the tent. After a simple wash, Chen Shi took her to the top of the mountain and looked into the distance. The green mountains in the distance were dark and misty. Far away from the smog of Shangjing, large clouds floated gently on the top of the mountain. Seeing such a beautiful scene, the little girl excitedly ran on the grass. Children at this age were always innocent and beautiful, like a flawless gem, pure and dazzling. She grinned and laughed, like a butterfly swimming in the flowers. Accompanied by the beautiful morning sun, her laughter resounded throughout the mountain. Nian Nian, be careful of the stones under your feet. Don't fall. After packing up the tent, the little girl still didn't want to leave. Qin Ruoying stood aside and watched her run freely on the grass. This was the fruit of her and Chen Shi's love, the baby she gave birth to after 10 months of pregnancy. Therefore, whenever she saw Nian Nian giggling happily, Qin Ruoying's mouth would always reveal a faint smile. Qin Ruoying quietly accompanied the little fellow. Chen Shi, who was still packing, suddenly turned his head and looked at her quietly. The woman in front of him, whose heart was as simple as a simple flower, was still as moving as ever. Falling flowers are silent. People are as indifferent as chrysanthemums. The beauty of a book can be read. He reckoned that he wouldn't be able to finish reading Qin Ruoying's book in his lifetime. Chen Shi looked at Qin Ruoying quietly, while Qin Ruoying looked at the little fellow quietly. This scene was very similar to the hazy mood described by Bian Jilin in Cliffhanger. You stand on the bridge and look at the scenery. The sightseer is looking at you from upstairs. The moon adorns thy windows, you decorate other people's dreams. And you are my dream. When the family of 3 returned to Scarlet Cliff Castle and got on the bus again, it was already 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The short trip to Taihang ended in such a joyful atmosphere. Although the little fellow still wanted to continue, when she thought of the 2 brothers who were still waiting for her in the tea house, she couldn't wait to fly back to Shangjing, because she could show off in front of them again. This little fellow was still young, but she especially enjoyed the feeling of being envied. And the 2 brothers gave in to her, so every time she showed off, even if they weren't interested, they would try their best to look extremely envious. Thinking about it, it was quite difficult for the 2 of them. In the past, when Auntie Zhang took care of Nian Nian, the child was a careful and cautious mimosa. Now that she had been with her parents for a long time, the mimosa had become a little daisy commonly seen on the roadside. Lively and cute, she wasn't weak and delicate like the precious flowers. Chen Shi was very satisfied with this. The bus soon arrived at Shangjing. As soon as they walked out of the bus station, Chunshi took the little fellow to the parking lot. Before he could reach out to call a taxi, two girls in their early 20s suddenly ran in front of him and excitedly pointed at the little fellow and said, "Hello, is this your daughter?" The two girls were quite good-looking. Big eyes, sharp chins, and high noses. They were the most popular faces on the internet. The two of them wore sports vests that exposed their navel, and a pair of tight-fitting sports pants, which perfectly displayed the advantages of their figures. Yes, what's the matter? Chunshi had always been very polite to ordinary people, so he simply nodded. Brother, it's like this. We saw that your daughter is so cute, so we want to ask her to take a short video with us. Just 15 seconds, is that okay? Short video. The waves of the internet came one after another, so old antiques like Chunshi were naturally eliminated a long time ago. However, when Qin Ruoying heard the little girl mention the three words short video, she couldn't help but smile and explain, they should be talking about TikTok. Oh yes, TikTok. Seeing that Qin Ruoying seemed to have some understanding of this, the little girl quickly took out her phone and showed her homepage to Chunshi. She also specifically pointed at her number of fans, which was more than 400,000, which was quite good. We want to dance a gray dance with our sister. Look, it's this video. There are only 2 or 3 movements. It's very simple. Chunshi looked at it and found that it was indeed very simple. He looked down at the little fellow and asked, "Nian Nian, sister wants to dance with you, are you willing?" Hearing this, the little fellow seemed to be a little shy. She quickly hid half of her body behind Chunshi. After she felt that she was safe, she poked her head out and glanced at the phone screen that the little girl handed over. "Sister, don't be afraid. Look, it's just a few movements. You only need to do it once with us." The little fellow shrunk behind Chunshi timidly. She seemed to be a little unwilling. However, Chunshi knew the little fellow's character very well. It was not an exaggeration to say that this little fellow only needed to blink her eyes, and he already knew what she was thinking. With her current reaction, it was not that she did not want to, but she did not dare. Seeing that there were people coming and going at the station, the little fellow would more or less be a little shy. In this case, Chunshi, as a father, naturally had to encourage her more. Just play for fun, treat it as entertainment, and train her courage at the same time. It was a good thing. Therefore, Chunshi squatted beside the little fellow and persuaded her for a while. Father's words were always useful, so after hesitating for a while, the little fellow mustered up her courage and nodded. Then she walked out timidly. The movements were indeed very simple. It took a total of 15 seconds. Excluding the head and the tail, it probably took less than 10 seconds to actually jump up. Therefore, after the two girls demonstrated it in slow motion, the little fellow remembered most of it. Although she remembered the movements, she did not immediately start. Instead, she pouted and said to Chunshi, "Papa, you dance first. I'll dance after you." "I'll dance?" Chunshi looked at the little fellow helplessly, but when he saw her serious face, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. Seeing this, Qin Ruoying not only did not help Chunshi, but also added fuel to the fire. "Just dance for her to see. If you don't dance, how would she dare to dance?" Chapter 341. Dancing. For Chunshi, dancing was not a difficult task. It was nothing more than making one move after another according to the rhythm of the music. But when she thought about how he was going to perform a web celebrity dance in such a crowded place, Chunshi felt a little weird. It made her feel like her limbs were becoming a little clumsy. At the end of the day, it was still a psychological barrier. However, when he looked at his wife and children's expectant eyes, Chunshi decided to go all out. As for his reputation, could it be eaten? As a result, such a scene played out outside the busy Shangjing station. A man in a mountaineering suit danced the ash dance with the company of 2 sexy and hot internet celebrities. Looking at his standard movements, he looked like a professionally trained dancer. Chunshi seemed to be in a good mood today. So after he finished dancing, he even imitated the handsome pose of a celebrity and winked at Qin Ruoying with a domineering expression. On the spot, Qin Ruoying was so happy that she couldn't stand up straight. "Daddy is so amazing." Qin Ruoying couldn't stop laughing, but the little girl was obviously shocked by her daddy's handsomeness. Therefore, when she finished watching Chun Shi's demonstration, the little girl couldn't wait to jump in front of the camera. Then she imitated Chun Shi's left and right hand gestures. Her little face was so happy that it was about to bloom. She was a child, so she didn't need to do anything. As long as she showed a pure smile, and was happy from the bottom of her heart in front of the camera, she would naturally receive countless likes. The 15-second video was quickly recorded, but the little girl couldn't stop at all. It was as if she had eaten ecstasy and was completely high. "Mommy, you too." The little guy ran to Qin Ruoying's side and pulled her along, wanting her to jump with him. Qin Ruoying couldn't persuade her, so in the end, she could only smile bitterly and dance with her. The two girls had picked up a treasure today. Just Chun Shi and his wife's photos alone were enough to win an international photography award. Not to mention that they were a family of 3 now. The family of 3 was having a good time here, attracting the attention of the passers-by. Many people even stopped and took out their mobile phones to take pictures. Seeing that there were more and more onlookers, Chun Shi thought about it again and again, and had to stop the little fellow's excitement. After letting her say hello to the 2 sisters, he took her and left directly. Seeing this, the little girl hurriedly caught up with Chun Shi and wanted to leave his WeChat account, hoping that they could take videos together in the future. However, she was decisively rejected by Chun Shi. After all, he had no intention of letting Ninian become an internet celebrity. It was fine to play around, but not when it came to other things. This was a matter of principle. Thus, the 2 girls could only stand by the roadside and watch regretfully as the money tree got further and further away from them. Although they had left, the little fellow still hadn't woken up from the extremely magical background music. Thus, she kept pestering Qin Ruoying to play music for her. Then she started wriggling excitedly in the car. Looking at her smug look, it was probably the long-hidden nature of the country high that had been activated for a long time. Because of the delay at the station, when the family of 3 returned to Dongming Alley, it was already 7 o'clock in the evening. As soon as she stepped through the door, the little fellow rushed into the courtyard with her butt up. And at the same time she kept shouting, "Big cat! Big cat! Come quickly! I'll teach you how to dance." Before the word dance left her mouth, the little fellow suddenly stopped in her tracks. After being stunned for a moment, she looked at the figure next to her and exclaimed, "Auntie, you're back?" Chun Shi and Qin Ruoying heard the commotion in the courtyard, and they couldn't help but smile at each other. And then they crossed the Chuehua gate side by side. Wasn't the figure standing on the steps of the east wing Qin Xueqing, whom they hadn't seen for a long time? His sister-in-law was still elegant, but the most eye-catching thing was her right hand. "Oh, your hand has recovered. So fast." Chun Shi looked at Qin Xueqing in astonishment. He really didn't expect her to be able to step into the golden core stage in such a short time. Although his sister-in-law's martial arts foundation was not bad, this speed of progress, it seemed a little too fast. While Chun Shi was still puzzled, Qin Xueqing calmly explained to him, "The organization recently found some rare elixirs. My qualifications are not bad, so I got the priority to use them. With the help of the elixirs, I rushed to the Heavenly Man stage in one go." "Rare elixirs?" Chun Shi repeated it, and suddenly he had some understanding in his heart. As the spiritual qi of heaven and earth became more and more intense, some precious treasures of heaven and earth would naturally be born. With the power of Huaxia, it was not difficult to collect these rare treasures. His sister-in-law was young, had a solid foundation and good qualifications. In addition, she was originally a great guru at the peak of the Gang realm. After practicing the practice method Chun Shi gave her, she naturally made rapid progress. Therefore, even without the help of external forces, it was estimated that she could soon break through to the Heavenly Man stage. The Heavenly Man was just a pseudo-elixir stage. Only those above the Heavenly Man could barely be regarded as the Golden Core stage. In the blink of an eye, his sister-in-law had reached the Golden Core stage. It had to be said, time really passed quickly. "You haven't been home recently. What have you been busy with?" Qin Ruoying also hadn't seen Qin Xueqing for a long time. Now that she suddenly saw her back and her injuries had recovered, Qin Ruoying naturally felt happy for her from the bottom of her heart. Therefore, after handing the luggage to Chen Shi, Qin Ruoying stepped forward and pulled Qin Xueqing to talk. His wife wanted to catch up with his sister-in-law. As her brother-in-law, Chen Shi naturally didn't want to disturb them. So after taking the luggage, he asked the little fellow to go back to the room to wash her face and change her clothes. But the little fellow didn't pay attention to him. As soon as the big cat came over, the little fellow ran straight to the fish tank with the big cat in her arms. Then, under her leadership, the cat and the fish shook crazily to the music from the mobile phone. Left, right, forward, backward. The little fellow led the dance in front. The big cat squatted on the ground and waved its paws. Big Head floated in the fish tank and shook its head and tail. Looking at their silly looks, Chen Shi could only shake his head with a smile. Then he went to the kitchen alone to prepare dinner. While cooking, Chen Shi also pondered about his sister-in-law's sudden return. Actually, even if he used his but to think, he knew that Qin Wanqing was being used by Wu Lian again. The Wu Lian successfully made Chen Shi reveal the tip of the iceberg through Su Feng's provocation. When they finally realized Chen Shi's potential, they immediately transferred their sister-in-law back. They were afraid that Chen Shi would vent his anger on them. On the other hand, they wanted to let Chen Shi see with his own eyes that the Wu Lian would never treat his own people badly. So they let their sister-in-law get a big bargain. Otherwise, how could they let her use this kind of heaven and earth treasure, which was very helpful for cultivation? As a large organization with an official background, this kind of decision was naturally right. But this kind of behavior made Chen Shi very disgusted. If it was useful, they would hold you in high regard. If it was useless, they would immediately throw you aside. Too utilitarian. Chen Shi didn't want to deal with the Wu Lian anymore. So he decisively put this problem to the back of his mind, and turned to think about another problem. If he didn't remember wrongly, Bai Hong once said that the divine gate would open again in a month at most. And Chapter 342. Life was back on track again. It was so peaceful that not a single ripple could be felt. The only thing that made Chen Shi feel a little uncomfortable was the little girl was addicted to the phone after all. Since the last short video, the little thing wanted to play with it from time to time. Although the brothers were not naughty, they were definitely the most enthusiastic audience. They would always give the warmest applause to the little girl at the end of her performance. In the long run, it also indirectly encouraged the little girl's self-confidence, which led to her clamoring to play music on the phone at all times. Chen Shi had always been reluctant to let the little girl touch the phone, but he could not resist her reasonable request. Dancing was a good thing after all, so naturally, he could only let her be. To be on the safe side, Qin Ruoying also specifically deleted most of the software on the phone, leaving only the system's music player. But how smart were the children nowadays? When Qin Ruoying put the phone aside to play music for the little girl, the brothers could not help but fiddle with it. After all, they had been yearning for magical toys like the phone for a long time. Therefore, even if Qin Ruoying had made enough precautions, she still could not stop the brothers from fiddling with it. It did not matter if they were young and illiterate. Anyway, they would always find something new. Therefore, the door to a new world was poked open by them one by one. Aunt Zhang and Gu Lao's years of suppression were finally released for children. How fun were games! Just one look at the picture, and the brothers were completely fascinated. Under the leadership of these two bad friends, the little girl was no longer naughty, and became addicted to playing games on the phone. When Chen Shi found out and wanted to stop her, she started crying and throwing a tantrum on the spot, refusing to put down the phone in her hand. The phone is fun. I want to play with the phone. I don't want toys. I want to play with the phone. This time, Chen Shi was at his wit's end. Pandora's box had been opened, and it was basically impossible to close it again, unless their memories of this period were erased. But Nian was his daughter after all, and the child was still so young. How could Chen Shi bear to use magic to forcibly erase her memory? What's more, it was already the era of the mobile internet. Mobile phones had become a necessity in life. No matter how much one tried to prevent it, the child would come into contact with a mobile phone one day. Therefore, the only thing Chen Shi could do now was to set some rules with this little thing, and set a time limit for it to play every day. It's okay to play with your phone, but you have to learn self-control first. This was more important than anything else. It was precisely because of this that how to cultivate Nianyan's self-control became Chenxi's top priority. For this reason, Chenxi didn't even have time to play chess with Gu Lao. Almost every day he would try to find some fun things to do, such as boating, fishing, flying kites, and other outdoor activities. Chenxi only hoped that this could distract the little girl's attention, so that she would not hold the phone all day long. The hearts of all parents in the world. Just like that, the days passed by one. While Chenxi was busy taking care of the child, he did not completely idle. Instead, he took the time to do something bad. And that was, including the Sundial Brilliance Temple, the 5 temples left by the Taiqing Divine Ancestor were all demolished. By searching the memories in Bai Hong's mind, Chenxi found the remaining 4 temples and wantonly destroyed them. The escape route left by the Taiqing Divine Ancestor for the ancient cultivators was blocked by him just like that. And the reason why Chenxi did this was mainly because the Divine Gate was always an uncertain factor. He did not like this feeling very much, as if someone would emerge from the Divine Gate at any time. And last time when the Divine Gate closed, Chenxi had already noticed an extremely powerful aura from it. The unknown represented danger. It was not that Chenxi was afraid, but he did not want his family to face any danger. Not even a little bit. The ancient cultivators had left for too long. After so many years of evolution, the earth had long changed. They were no longer suitable for this era. This was the modern era, not the ancient mythological era. So after thinking for a long time, Chenxi finally made such a selfish decision. He destroyed all the temples that served as coordinates and completely blocked the ancient cultivators' return route, so that they would obediently stay in the great world, and not come out to cause trouble from time to time. Whether it was out of selfishness or to protect the Earth's existing environment, this decision was obviously the most correct. To be honest, when he demolished the Sundial Brilliance Temple, it really made Chenxi's heart ache. He destroyed an excellent cultivation place with an 8 times faster time flow just like that. In fact, ever since Bai Hong revealed the information about the 5 temples, Chenxi roughly understood why the time flow in the Sundial Brilliance Temple was different from that of the Earth. It was because the Sundial Brilliance Temple was connected to the Great World, so the time flow in the temple was actually the time flow in the Great World. In addition, Chenxi guessed that there should be another Sundial Brilliance Temple in the Great World. Just like there was a receiver at both ends of the phone, the temple on Earth was just a child temple, and the temple in the Great World was the mother temple. In order to confirm whether destroying the temple could really cut off the connection between the Great World and the Earth, Chenxi recently paid special attention to the fluctuation of the spirit qi of heaven and earth. June 1st, Children's Day. On this holiday that only belonged to children, the fog that covered the sky finally appeared again. The scale of the spirit qi tide this time was indeed very large. As long as it was a place with a little bit of spirit qi, there was now fog everywhere. The fog covered the sun, like a summer shower, and the whole sky was so gloomy that it seemed like it was about to drip water. Chenxi was not sure where the Divine Gate would appear, so after saying goodbye to Qin Ruoying, he left the tea house and then patrolled in the direction of the spirit qi surge, wanting to see if the Divine Gate would appear again. The fog lasted for more than an hour. Chenxi flew more than half of Huaxia, but in the end, he did not find any trace of the Divine Gate's appearance, and his heart immediately calmed down. The spirit qi tide had begun to weaken, and it seemed that the Divine Gate would not appear again. Thinking of this, Chenxi's heart suddenly calmed down a lot, so he turned his head and flew back to Shangjing. And just as he was about to go home, Qin Ruoying, who was playing games with the little guy in the tea house, suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. She didn't even have the time to react before a feeling of the world spinning violently surged out. The scene in front of her blurred, and Qin Ruoying seemed to have lost her strength, and she could not even stand steadily. If she had not grabbed the chair next to her in time, she would have fallen directly to the ground. Qin Ruoying had no choice but to tightly grab the back of the chair next to her, and then carefully sit down to rest for a while. After she felt a little better, Qin Ruoying frowned slightly, and began to check her own situation. In any case, she was a foundation establishment stage cultivator, so how could she still feel dizzy and blurred vision? This feeling had already appeared once before, and Chunshi carefully checked for her at that time, but he did not find any problems, so Qin Ruoying did not take it to heart. But now this feeling appeared again. Chapter 343. For a foundation establishment stage cultivator to frequently experience dizziness and blurred vision, this was clearly a very strange thing. Therefore, when Chunshi came back, Qin Ruoying immediately told Chunshi about this matter. When she said this, Chunshi immediately exploded like a big cat. Gu Lao greeted him with a smile, but his face was cold. He didn't even respond and directly pulled Qin Ruoying to the back kitchen of the tea house. Chunshi couldn't be blamed for losing his composure. After all, there weren't many things in this world that were worthy of his attention. If something really happened to Qin Ruoying, Chunshi was afraid that he would go berserk on the spot. He would never be as harmless as before. But it was strange. Although Qin Ruoying's aptitude was average, in any case she was now able to cultivate, right? Her earth soul had returned to her body. In the case of 3 complete souls, how could she fall ill? Not to mention what realm Qin Ruoying's cultivation had reached. Even if she really did have some kind of strange illness, Chunshi, as the best doctor in the world, wouldn't be able to find the problem? Due to all kinds of worries, Chunshi was really nervous this time. Where did the problem come from? Out of caution, Chunshi first used the amplification effect of the soul crystal to greatly increase the strength of his divine soul. Only then did he release his divine sense to carefully investigate Qin Ruoying's body. There was no problem with the body's organs, 5 viscera, 6 bowels, and 8 major systems. Since the whole person was healthy, the problem was obviously in the divine soul. Therefore, Chunshi gave the soul crystal to Qin Ruoying, and then let her try to let her divine soul out of her body. Perhaps it was because Qin Ruoying's current cultivation was too low. So even if he used the soul crystal to force her divine soul out of her body, Chunshi couldn't see anything wrong with her divine soul. From the perspective of an immortal cultivator, the soul was the most important organ in the human body. Without the soul, a human would be nothing more than a walking corpse. An ordinary person's soul was hidden in their heart aperture. Only after they had successfully cultivated could their soul leave their heart aperture and completely merge with their yuanying, becoming the second life of the cultivator. As long as yuanying did not die, her spirit would not be destroyed. That was why there was the saying of possession and rebirth. The heart aperture was where the soul was stored. It was also the most mysterious and important part of the human body. Since he could not find any problems with the divine soul, Chunshi speculated that the problem should lie here. Therefore, he was now faced with a choice, and that was, should he allow his spirit to enter Qin Ruoying's heart aperture? Chunshi had never tried to let his spirit enter someone else's heart aperture. After all, what was the difference between this and possession? He believed that other than Qin Ruoying, there was absolutely no one in this world who would let him enter their heart aperture without reservation. Chunshi was somewhat apprehensive, because the difference in their cultivation was too great. If Qin Ruoying's divine soul was a small pond, then Chunshi was the boundless ocean. What would happen if he poured the water from the ocean into a small pond? Chunshi had never heard of such a situation, so naturally he had never seen it before. Therefore, not to mention trying it out, just imagining it made him somewhat fearful. Qin Ruoying was the most important person in his life. If something went wrong and hurt her heart aperture, Chunshi was afraid that he could only commit suicide to apologize to the world. What to do? He couldn't advance or retreat. For a moment, Chunshi was stunned. Qin Ruoying saw Chunshi's worry, so after thinking about it again and again, she said gently, "Don't worry so much. You see, I'm fine now. It shouldn't be a big problem." Chunshi did not immediately reply. After a long silence, he said with a dignified face, "No, this matter is not simple. We must find the problem." After saying that, he wanted to use the soul crystal to check Qin Ruoying's divine soul again. But at this moment, the little girl suddenly ran over with her phone in her arms. "Mama, the phone is ringing. The phone is ringing." Although she was illiterate, she could still distinguish between ringtones and music, So she ran to Qin Ruoying's side and held the phone high as if she was presenting a treasure. Qin Ruoying took the phone and found that she did not receive a phone call, but a text message. The sender was Qin Yongyan, and the content was very short. The general meaning was that he had something to do and was going out for a while, so the couple did not have to worry. Qin Yongyan had always lived in seclusion. Today he went out for the first time, which made Qin Ruoying feel a little strange. However, the elders naturally did not need to report to the younger generation, so she did not take this matter to heart. After showing it to Chun Shi, she returned the phone to the little girl. The little girl was busy playing games. She took the phone and ran out of the hall. But just after she ran 2 steps, she seemed to have thought of something. She quickly turned her head and asked with a puzzled face, "Mama, what are you doing here?" "Mama is talking to Papa about the purchase of goods." "Oh." The little girl nodded woodenly, but her legs seemed to be rooted to the ground, and she stood there motionless. With her current reaction, Chunshi did not need to think to know that the little girl wanted them to go out and keep her company because they had not come out for a long time. This made Chunshi feel very gratified. Games were not as important as parents. Meanwhile, Isi, on an unknown island. Just like the ice and fire island described by Mr. Jin Yong, it was full of spiritual energy and full of vitality. The scenery on the island was even more beautiful, like a fairyland. Such an excellent tourist spot, but so far few people knew about it. No one had set foot on it all year round. This island was the legendary East Sea Immortal Mountain, Daiyu Island. The reason why ordinary people could not find this island was that there was a large array on the island that gathered spiritual energy, defended it, and concealed it. The ancient cultivators had left, but their inheritance was left behind. The village hidden in the depths of Qinling was the place of inheritance, but there was more than one place of inheritance in this world. Daiyu Island was one of them. Daiyu Island was also a place of inheritance, but there was a big difference between Daiyu Island and All Saints Valley. All Saints Valley was run by the clan elders. As long as foreign cultivators passed the test of the clan elders, they could join All Saints Valley and officially become a member of the village. The 2 words Feng Xiyuan carved on the stone tablet outside the village were the foundation of the village. Shape does not exist, Feng Xiyuan accepts. All rivers run into the sea. All Saints Valley was very inclusive, so whether it was martial artists, necromancers, or other inheritances, everyone could live in harmony in the village and learn from each other in order to break through to the diviner level as soon as possible, or even ascend to the divine gate. Compared to All Saints Valley, Daiyu Island was more mysterious and naturally more isolated. It did not accept outsiders and was never open to the outside world, so the residents of the island had always had the same surname. They were of the same clan and had been passed down from generation to generation. Chapter 344. East Sea Immortal Mountain, Daiyu Island. Daiyu Island was not an isolated island, but a group of more than 10 small islands. It was like a county with more than 10 villages under its jurisdiction. 17 small islands were scattered randomly on the sea. Although the islands were not connected, they were not very far apart either. As far as the eye could see, it was all clear and transparent seawater, fine golden beaches, and lush forests. This place was like a pure land that had never been polluted by industry. Everything was so beautiful. In such a paradise, it was natural that it would be flourishing and flourishing. Therefore, the residents of the island all had the same surname, Jiang. One had to know that the origin of surnames could be traced back to the birth of new humans. At that time, humans were still in a matriarchal system, so many surnames had the word woman in them. Jiang was one of the 8 great ancient surnames. Ever since the ancient cultivators left, the Jiang clansmen left on Earth had sealed themselves on Daiyu Island. If not for the serious dangers of close kin reproduction, and the need to inject new blood into the clan from time to time, the Jiang clan would never allow any outsiders to set foot on Daiyu Island. It was precisely because the Jiang clan had followed the ancestral teachings of seclusion for so many years that the Jiang clan's inheritance was extremely complete. This had become the thing that the Jiang clan was most proud of. Just like the rumors in the outside world, they were what the ordinary cultivators were talking about, descendants of immortals. However, due to the gradual weakening of Earth's spirit energy, even the ancient cultivators could only stay away from it, let alone these abandoned children left behind on Earth. Therefore, rather than saying that the Jiang clan was conserving their strength, it was better to say that they were struggling at death's door here. At their worst, there was not even a single immortal in the entire Jiang clan. However, this was all in the past. With the gradual recovery of spirit energy, the Jiang clan was about to welcome its most glorious moment. The current clan leader, Jiang Yuankui, was very confident about this. On this day, Jiang Yuankui was handling clan affairs in the ancestral hall of Qixia Peak, when a clan disciple suddenly came to report, interrupting his train of thought. Clan leader, someone wants to see you. Who is it? This person is from the All Saints Valley. His name is Qin Yongyan. All Saints Valley? Wasn't it destroyed long ago? Jiang Yuankui repeated this phrase, and a faint smile appeared on his face. It was obvious that there had been some unpleasantness between Daiyu Island and All Saints Valley. Jiang Yuankui pondered for a moment, then coldly said to the messenger, "It seems that those old things are really dead. Now, a junior of the young generation wants to see me? Tell him to scram." Hearing this, the messenger had an extremely awkward expression on his face. After a moment of hesitation, he said cautiously, "Sir, that person also said that he is Mr. Chen's father-in-law." Mr. Chen? Jiang Yuankui froze for a moment. Then he seemed to think of something, but he wasn't sure. He frowned and asked, "Which Mr. Chen?" "He's the one who soared to immortality with a single sword strike in Taihang Mountain." Jiang Yuankui was silent. After a long moment of silence, he said solemnly, "Tell him to come see me." "Yes, Patriarch." At the foot of Qixia Peak, Qin Yongyan stood proudly in front of the mountain gate in a plain robe. Although it was called a peak, it was actually only a few dozen meters high. From afar, one could see the cornice of the ancestral shrine at the top of the mountain. Perhaps it was because no stranger had appeared on Daiyu Island for a long time. So when Qin Yongyan stood there, countless Jiang family members couldn't help but come to take a look. Qin Yongyan was like an old monk in meditation. After standing there for more than 10 minutes, the Jiang clan member who went to deliver the message hurriedly rushed over. "Mr. Qin, please come with me." Then, the man led Qin Yongyan to the square outside the ancestral shrine. Qin Yongyan had been silent the whole time, but when he arrived at the square, he set his eyes on the giant bronze cauldron. This giant cauldron, All Saints Valley once had one. Qin Yongyan didn't have to wait long in the square before a man in a brown brocade robe strode out. This man looked about the same age as him, probably in his 40s, but his tone was slightly arrogant. As soon as he saw Qin Yongyan, he asked impatiently, "Tell me, why are you here?" Junior Qin Yongyan greets Mr. Jiang. Cultivators naturally couldn't be judged by their appearances. Although Jiang Yuankui's attitude wasn't good, Qin Yongyan still bowed respectfully to him. Jiang Yuankui naturally had the right to be arrogant. After all, his age and seniority were much higher than Qin Yongyan's. However, when Jiang Yuankui approached Qin Yongyan, he suddenly realized Qin Yongyan had actually stepped into the celestial being realm, which surprised Jiang Yuankui quite a bit. A junior with the surname Yong should be between 40 and 60 years old, but he had already stepped into the celestial being realm? This kind of cultivation aptitude was rare even in the Jiang family. No wonder this man dared to climb Qixia Peak alone to ask for a meeting. Jiang Yuankui frowned as he sized up Qin Yongyan. Seeing that he didn't answer, Qin Yongyan cupped his hands and bowed. He said directly, "I know that outsiders are not allowed to set foot on Daiyu Island. The reason why I came so abruptly this time is that I have a question that I would like to ask Mr. Jiang." "Tell me about it." Because the Jiang family's inheritance was relatively complete, since ancient times, many cultivators had wanted to come to the island to seek guidance. Under normal circumstances, if it didn't involve too many secrets, or if he happened to be in a good mood at that time, the Jiang family's patriarch would answer the question, which could be considered as forming a good relationship with the outside world. As a result, the Jiang family's reputation naturally became more and more well-known. "Thank you, Mr. Jiang." Qin Yongyan bowed again, then slowly said, "I have an only daughter, who entered the ancestral hall at the age of 8 and became Xian Nu. In the blink of an eye, 20 years have passed, and my daughter has married and has children, living a stable and happy life. Qin Yongyan narrated in a calm tone. But when Jiang Yuankui heard the two words Xian Nu, he frowned on the spot. This was because he had already guessed what Qin Yongyan wanted to ask. Just as expected, Qin Yongyan said some seemingly long-winded words, but in the end he suddenly changed the topic and said, "My wife is also Xian Nu, so I know very well that most Xian Nu won't live past 40. This kind of tragedy has happened once before, and now it's happening to my daughter again. Let me say something disrespectful to the ancestors. If I could turn back time, even if I had to sacrifice my life, I would never let my daughter become Xian Nu. Unfortunately, it's too late to say anything now." Speaking up to this point, Qin Yongyan raised his head and glanced at Jiang Yuankui. Then, with a solemn expression, he said, "This junior has heard that most of the mystical maidens of the Jiang clan will have good endings. Therefore, I took the liberty to visit. I only hope that Mr. Jiang can dispel this junior's doubts and save my daughter who has finally managed to live a good life." After saying this, Qin Yongyan bowed again, very respectfully to Jiang Yuankui. Jiang Yuankui silently looked at Qin Yongyan. After being silent for a long time, he said in a deep voice, "Get up first." Hearing this, Qin Yongyan's face lit up with joy. Just as he was about to thank him, he heard Jiang Yuankui sigh and say, "I'm very sorry." Chapter 345. The sea breeze blew over the mountains and over the treetops, gently carrying fallen leaves to the square outside the ancestral shrine. After hearing Jiang Yuankui's reply, Qin Yongyan's heart sank. He hurriedly bowed and begged, "I have also heard that the Jiang clan's secret has never been mentioned to outsiders. However, this matter concerns my daughter's life, so I have no choice but to treat it seriously. Mister, you are the leader of a clan. If you have any difficulties, this junior can understand. I only hope that sir can give me some pointers and point out a path for my poor daughter. This junior will definitely remember such a great favor in his heart at all times. Thank you for your trouble, sir." After speaking, Qin Yongyan bowed to Jiang Yuankui again. The meaning of his words was very clear. Even if Jiang Yuankui could not reveal it due to the clan rules, he could still give him some pointers. In any case, he could give him a direction to work towards. Then he could find a solution in that direction. This request did not seem excessive, but Jiang Yuankui did not know why. After hearing Qin Yongyan's words, he responded with an expressionless face, "I already said that I cannot help you with this matter. Please go back." After speaking, Jiang Yuankui flicked his sleeves and turned to walk back to the ancestral shrine. "Sir Jiang, please stay." Qin Yongyan could not help but feel anxious. He could not help but take a few steps forward, wanting to say a few words to Jiang Yuankui. However, at this time, a young man appeared in front of him at an extremely fast speed. Then he stretched out his right hand and stopped Qin Yongyan. The clan leader's meaning is very clear. Please go back. Qin Yongyan glanced at the young man, only to discover that this young man was actually a diviner-level expert. For a moment, he was unable to advance or retreat. Qin Yongyan's face revealed a look of struggle. After hesitating for a moment, he suddenly bent his knees in front of this young man, and with a plop, he knelt on the ground. "I hope that Sir Jiang will be merciful and save my poor daughter." A diviner was actually doing such a thing. This made the young man feel a little surprised, so he could not help but look at Jiang Yuankui, wanting to hear his opinion. Jiang Yuankui stopped, but he didn't turn around. "It's not that I don't want to help you, but I can't." Her fate was sealed the moment she became the Siming Xian Nu. "Isn't it too late for you to regret it now?" At this point, Jiang Yuankui suddenly glanced at the young man and said, "Feng Yan, help me see the guest out." "Yes, Patriarch." The young man called Feng Yan nodded. Then he reached out his right hand and said to Qin Yongyan, "Mr. Qin, please go back." Qin Yongyan knelt on the ground and remained silent for a long time. In the end, he gently shook his head and said in a very lonely voice, "Forget it. I have disturbed Mr. today. I hope Mr. won't blame me. I will take my leave now." After that, Qin Yongyan stood up and slowly walked down the mountain. As they walked, they listened to the constant gurgling sounds of the waves. Qin Yongyan seemed to have suddenly thought of something, and a self-mocking smile appeared on his face. He had personally sent Qin Ruoying to the ancestral hall, and now it was too late for regrets. The reason he regretted it was all because of that cheap son-in-law. Qin Yongyan would never forget that day. All Saints Valley. In a small courtyard at the back of the mountain. When Chunshi faced everyone and loudly shouted, "Let's go home," it was like a heavy hammer hitting Qin Yongyan's heart. His voice was as loud as a bell, and as loud as thunder. It also made him completely wake up. Qin Yongyan was in great pain as he watched his lover die in his arms, but he didn't understand why he was in pain. Everything about the Siming Xiannu was normal for everyone in the village. In everyone's opinion, becoming the Xiannu was always an extremely glorious thing. Even if they knew that the Xiannu would have a shorter lifespan. Becoming the Xiannu was the most glorious thing in All Saints Valley since ancient times. Children of 8 or 9 years old were ignorant. If the elders said that the Xiannu was good, the children would naturally want to become the respected Xiannu. Until they reached adulthood, until they died prematurely due to the exhaustion of their lifespan. They always believed that being able to become the Xiannu was their blessing. Everything had been deeply ingrained in them. Qin Yongyan finally understood why he had felt pain in the past. What was the purpose of life? For the current him, being able to see his daughter grow up and live a happy and stable life was the most meaningful thing. As for the rest, it wasn't important. In order to make up for his mistakes, the first thing Qin Yongyan did after becoming a diviner was to seek help from Daiyu Island. Since the rules were set by humans, they could naturally make 1 or 2 exceptions. But unfortunately, Qin Yongyan's ability was limited, and he didn't have enough face. Jiang Yuankui obviously couldn't break the rules for him. He couldn't, but someone else could. Thinking of this, Qin Yongyan couldn't help but chuckle. But there was a bit of loneliness, a bit of unwillingness in that smile, and at the same time a bit of consolation. He was old. He couldn't take care of his daughter like before. He had taken care of Ying for half his life, but now this responsibility fell on the shoulders of someone else. For a father, this feeling was indeed a bit complicated. But no matter what, as long as Ying could be happy, as a father he didn't care. Polygonum Jigu Bandit Yi Hao. Mourning for my parents who gave birth to me. Polygonum Jigu Bandit Yi Hao. Mourning for my parents who gave birth to me. When Qin Yongyan's figure disappeared from the foot of the mountain, Jiang Fengyan thoughtfully came to the ancestral hall. There were no outsiders present, so Jiang Fengyan directly called out to Jiang Yuankui, "Father." Jiang Yuankui held 3 sticks of incense, and stood in front of the ancestral tablets respectfully. After inserting the incense in his hand into the incense burner, Jiang Yuankui turned around and asked, "Is he gone?" "Yes." Jiang Fengyan responded. Then he said with a confused expression, "Father, I don't understand." "What don't you understand? You don't even know this, do you? Qin Yongyan's daughter is called Qin Ruoying. I heard that it was because of her that the All Saints Valley was flattened by Mr. Chun. So what?" Jiang Fengyan was stunned for a moment. He seemed to be completely unable to understand Jiang Yuankui's approach, so he hurriedly said, "Father, Mr. Chun is above the celestial being. It's completely inappropriate to offend him over a few words, right?" Jiang Yuankui didn't answer. Seeing this, Jiang Fengyan gritted his teeth and continued, "The spirit energy has been surging too much recently. Second granduncle may break through at any time. If we take this opportunity to build a good relationship with Mr. Chun, we may be able to ask him for help. If he's so helpful, why do you have to push him away?" Seeing Jiang Fengyan's puzzled look, Jiang Yuankui laughed and said, "Fengyan, you're oversimplifying things. Let's not talk about your second granduncle first. This Siming Xiannu is actually not as simple as you think." Jiang Yuankui explained with a smile. However, Jiang Fengyan still couldn't agree with his point of view, so he couldn't help but shout, "Father!" He wanted to say something, but Jiang Yuankui waved his hand directly, indicating that he should stop talking. Just wait and see. If Mr. Chen really cares about that woman, then he'll definitely go to Daiyu Island himself. When that time comes. Chapter 346. Because of Qin Ruoying's illness, Chunxi had been thinking hard about how to solve it. So he didn't realize that he was neglecting the little one. Since he came back, it was the first time he completely ignored the little one's feelings. Of course, the little one was a little unhappy. "I'm not happy. I'm not happy." So, early in the morning, the little one stuck to Chunxi and insisted that Chunxi play games with her. She didn't know why she suddenly became so clingy. Qin Ruoying wanted to take her to wash up, but the little one refused to go no matter what. She even put on a look of disdain, and didn't want Qin Ruoying to get close to her. Seeing this, the couple couldn't help but look at each other. Why did this child suddenly start to throw a tantrum? Qin Ruoying couldn't do anything about it, so she had to let Chunxi serve her. How to serve her? He could only play games with her and make her happy. The little one especially liked to play Fruit Ninja, which was a casual game that was popular all over the world. As long as you cut the fruit on the screen with your finger, you could get points. Although the gameplay was simple, it was very playable. Chunxi patiently played with her for a while, but the little thing was getting more and more excited. No matter what she said, she wouldn't wash up. Chunxi had no choice but to snatch the phone from her hand and show her a series of gorgeous combos. Then he pretended to be careless and deliberately cut the bomb and died. Seeing that her father was so powerful but still died, the little one immediately laughed happily. Seeing that she was finally happy, Chunxi immediately carried her to the bathroom and helped her wash up as fast as he could. After that, Chunxi used a lot of effort to make the little one swallow her breakfast. 4 or 5-year-old children were the most mischievous. Even an obedient and sensible child like Nian would inevitably be mischievous sometimes. So even if she was extra mischievous today, the couple didn't take it to heart. But the more they didn't care, the more this little thing acted up. On the way to the tea house, Chunxi said to go left, but she insisted on going right. It was as if she was deliberately going against Chunxi. She was already so pretentious. If Chunxi still didn't realize that the little fellow was deliberately being difficult, he would be too irresponsible as a father. Thus, Chunxi squatted beside the little girl, preparing to coax her. However, this little thing proudly turned its little face away, and put on a look of not wanting to talk to him. Seeing her attitude, Chunxi knew the seriousness of the matter. Therefore, he put on a very exaggerated expression, and as if he was performing in a stage play, he imitated Uncle Benshin's northeastern accent, and said in a low muffled voice, "What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong with little darling today? Why are you so unhappy?" Looking at Chunxi's performance, the little fellow suddenly couldn't hold it in. After twisting her small body proudly for a while, she said indignantly under Chunxi's constant questioning, "I don't like Papa anymore." After that, the little thing made a gesture to push Chunxi away. Looking at her aggressive posture, how could he let go of her at this time? Therefore, Chunxi hugged her tighter. "Oh, what's wrong? What did Papa do to make you unhappy? Don't you always say that you like Papa the most and then Mama the most? Why don't you like Papa all of a sudden?" Hearing this, the little thing seemed to suddenly think of something unhappy. She pouted on the spot, and then said to Chunxi with a stubborn face, "I don't like Papa anymore. Go and play with Mama. Don't play with me." As soon as these words came out, the couple couldn't help but laugh out loud. It turned out that, was his daughter jealous of her mother? Recently, Chunxi had been sticking to Qin Ruoying all day, for fear that something would happen to her. Although the little fellow had games to play and the 2 brothers to accompany her, her father's abnormal behavior still attracted her attention, and she couldn't help but feel a little down in her heart. Papa used to care about her a lot. Papa also cared about Mama, but he cared more about her. The little fellow was now in the sex bud stage, and it was actually very normal for her to have an Oedipus complex. This was a stage that children had to go through in their growth process. It was not a twisted mentality, nor was it a big problem. Because once this stage was passed, they might completely forget that they had a complex relationship with their biological father against their mother. In this regard, Chunxi naturally had to make appropriate guidance. So after thinking for a while, he looked into the little fellow's eyes and said to her very seriously, "Nian, do you know? Mama is sick?" Hearing this, the expression on the little fellow's face suddenly froze. She seemed to be very surprised, and after hearing Chen Shi's words, she quickly turned to look at Qin Ruoying. Aunt Zhang's health wasn't good, and she used to have old illnesses from time to time. The little fellow stayed by her side all year round, so she was very sensitive to the word sick since she was young. This was because she knew that once her grandmother fell sick, she would feel very uncomfortable, and sometimes she couldn't even stand up. She had never experienced that feeling, but she could still feel her grandmother's pain from the side. Therefore, every time this happened, she would be exceptionally obedient and wouldn't cause trouble for Aunt Zhang at all. Now that Chen Shi suddenly said that Qin Ruoying was sick, it naturally brought back the little fellow's bad memories, so she hesitated for a moment, and then asked timidly, "What's wrong with Mama?" "Mama is sick. Although it's not very serious, there's no way for her to recover in a short period of time." "Oh." The little fellow blinked her eyes, and her expression was a little stiff, as if she didn't understand what Chen Shi meant at all. Seeing this, Chen Shi continued to try to guide her. When a person is sick, they will become very weak. Does that mean they need someone to take care of them? This time, the little fellow finally understood, so she nodded and answered resolutely, "Yes. You and Mama are the people that Papa cares about the most. Now that Mama is sick, shouldn't Papa take good care of Mama?" "Yes. But Papa has to take care of Mama. Then he won't have time to play with you. Will you be angry?" "No. I'm not angry. Nian Nian is so sensible." Mo. Seeing that the little fellow listened to his words, Chen Shi kissed her little face as a reward. After Chen Shi's reasonable guidance, the little fellow seemed to realize that her previous behavior was wrong. So after hesitating for a while, she signaled Chen Shi to let go of her. After Chen Shi put her on the ground, the little fellow jumped to Qin Ruoying's side, then pulled Qin Ruoying's hand and said loudly, "Mama is sick, we have to take good care of Mama." After saying that, the little fellow looked up at Qin Ruoying and added, "Grandma said that when you're sick, you can't walk. We have to hold Mama's hand and walk." This silly child. Just now he was still cold to her, but now he suddenly became very kind. His face changed faster than flipping a book. Looking at the cute little thing in front of her, Qin Ruoying couldn't get angry even if she wanted to, so she could only smile and rub her head, then rolled her eyes at Chen Shi, as if she was complaining silently, "It's all your fault." Chapter 347. The little girl felt that she had been neglected recently. In order to prevent her from having such thoughts, Chen Shi brought her around Hohai. After playing with her for a while, the family of three slowly strolled back to the tea house. Her mother had become a patient, and the little girl was very concerned about it. So when she returned to the tea house, she didn't even have time to say hello to the brothers before she ran into the bar. She raised her head and asked Xiao Yuan to pour her a cup of hot water. The little girl eagerly brought the hot water to Qin Ruoying. No matter what, she wanted Qin Ruoying to take the medicine first. Qin Ruoying had never been to the hospital, so how could she have any medicine on her? So she could only tell the little girl that it didn't matter, and that she would be fine after a few days of rest. But the little girl didn't listen to anything she said, because in the little girl's mind, she must take medicine when she was sick. Only by taking medicine can she be cured. This was also the idea that Aunt Zhang had instilled in her since she was young. It was to prevent her from being unwilling to take medicine when she was sick in the future. He didn't expect that after leaving Aunt Zhang for so long, the little girl could still remember this. This made Chen Shi feel gratified. It was rare for her daughter to be so filial, so Qin Ruoying naturally couldn't discourage her. So after hesitating for a while, she took a Peiyuan pill from Chen Shi and pretended to take it. Seeing this, the little girl finally felt relieved. Then, as usual, she got together with the brothers and continued to play games. For a child, being happy was the most important thing. As long as she was happy every day, this childhood was worth remembering. Time flew by, and it was almost summer vacation. According to the couple's plan, after this summer vacation, the little girl would have to go to a senior class. The school would definitely be the top school, but it wasn't to force the little girl to be a top student. It was to give her a change of environment, so that she could be in contact with more children of the same age. On the other hand, It was also because these three little things had been playing too much recently. If they were left alone, it wouldn't be long before they would fumble around playing Mobile Legends. Playing games was addictive. Children had poor self-control, so it was better to play less. School was obviously the best place to go to rehab. After the start of summer, Hohai became lively again. Enjoying the cool air was different from enjoying the air conditioning. So after Qiao Yuan opened the door, she moved out a few sets of tables and chairs so that the guests could drink tea under the shade of a tree and enjoy the beautiful scenery of the lakeside. It had to be said that Qiao Yuan was indeed very competent as a shopkeeper. The little girl was well-behaved and had a sweet tongue. With her efforts during this period of time, she had indeed brought in many regular customers for the tea house. Although they were still in a state of loss, it was much better than before when they couldn't make ends meet. Seeing that the weather was gradually improving, Qiao Yuan bought a string of wind chimes from the internet and hung them on the door curtain. Every time the wind blew, a crisp and melodious ringing sound could be heard. It had a unique charm to it. The small tea house was still the same small tea house, but it was more lively than before. Perhaps it was an illusion, but Chunshi felt that his current life was like a tranquil lake. It was calm on the surface, but undercurrents were surging. He liked his current stable and ordinary life, so he didn't want to see any changes. Qin Ruoying's illness was an unknown variable to Chunshi. It had to be said that his sister-in-law came back at the right time. Qin Xueqing was also a Xian Nu. When Chunshi asked her if she had the same feelings, Qin Xueqing immediately gave an affirmative answer. But there was something strange. Qin Xueqing's symptoms weren't very obvious. Sometimes, the symptoms would disappear without anyone noticing. Chunshi couldn't help but suspect that it was because the time it took for the soul to return to the body was too short, and Qin Ruoying's cultivation was too low. So there was a normal rejection reaction. But no matter what, as long as a person felt any discomfort, it must be a warning from the body. Therefore, he still had to treat it with caution and pay more attention to it. How to observe? Of course, he had to stay by Qin Ruoying's side all day. Therefore, the person playing chess with Gu Lao now became Qin Ruoying. Although Qin Ruoying's chess skills weren't that good, she relied on Chunshi's pointers to barely be able to play chess with the old man. Wasn't this the same as slaying Gu Lao's dragon? The three people chatted while playing chess, when the wind chime at the door suddenly rang. Ring, ring, ring. The sound of the wind chime was crisp and pleasing to the ear. Qin Ruoying subconsciously turned her head to look, and was immediately shocked and stood up. Dad, why are you here? The person who came was Qin Yongyan. He was wearing a white traditional training suit today. This kind of outfit was particularly eye-catching in Hohai, which was famous for its bars. Qin Ruoying smiled, and went forward to greet Qin Yongyan. Chunshi also stood up and greeted. Dad. But as soon as the voice fell, Chunshi slightly frowned. Something seemed wrong. Qin Ruoying didn't notice the strangeness. After introducing Qin Yongyan to Gu Lao, she pulled Qin Yongyan to sit on the side and talked. Dad, is this your first time here? I thought you couldn't find it. I just came back from outside. Seeing that you weren't at home, I thought I'd come here to take a look. Okay, I'll call Nyin over and let her play with you for a while. After that, Qin Ruoying turned around and was ready to call the little girl over, but was stopped by Qin Yongyan with a smile. It's okay, isn't that child playing happily? Don't disturb her. Okay then. Although the father and daughter lived under the same roof, because Qin Yongyan was busy cultivating all day, they usually didn't even see each other face to face. Qin Yongyan rarely came to the tea house, so Qin Ruoying naturally had to accompany him to have a good talk. Since the old father-in-law came, this game of chess could only be temporarily suspended. After Chunshi excused himself to Gu Lao, he went to the bar to pour a cup of tea, and then sat next to Qin Ruoying. The father and daughter were chatting about daily life. After seeing Chunshi come over, Qin Yongyan smiled and said to the couple, Today, I actually have something to tell you. Seeing this, Qin Ruoying leaned forward slightly and put on a look of listening attentively. But Qin Yongyan didn't immediately speak, but looked around with a smile. Chunshi immediately understood what he meant, so he immediately set up a soundproof restriction, and then frowned and directly asked the question in his heart. Are you injured? From the moment Qin Yongyan entered the door, Chunshi found that his breath was not very stable, so he had this guess. Hearing this, Qin Yongyan didn't hide, nodded and explained with a smile. I had a small misunderstanding with someone before, but it has been solved. At this time, Qin Ruoying on the side finally recovered and couldn't help but exclaim. Are you injured? Where are you injured? Is it serious? Let me see. Qin Ruoying wanted to see where he was injured, but was stopped by Qin Yongyan with a smile. Don't worry, it's just a small injury. How can that be? She quickly helped Dad take a look. Don't leave any hidden dangers. Under Qin Ruoying's repeated requests, Qin Yongyan had to stretch out his right hand for Chunshi to check. Then, Chunshi found that Qin Yongyan's breath was in disorder because his meridians were injured. For a celestial, this degree of injury was naturally nothing, and he would recover in 2 or 3 days. Of course, the injury was not the main point. The main point was the injured person. Qin Ruoying kept asking Qin Yongyan how he was injured, but Qin Yongyan avoided this topic. After a few fruitless inquiries, Qin Ruoying could only pout and sit there sulking. She was already a mother, yet she was still acting like an angry little girl. Qin Yongyan couldn't help but chuckle at her antics. Ying, I came here today mainly to talk to you about some things about your mother. If you don't want to listen, I'll go back first. After saying that, Qin Yongyan got up and pretended to leave. Chapter 348. Looking at Qin Ruoying's resentful look, Qin Yongyan had a different feeling in his heart. In the blink of an eye, Ying had grown up and had a child of her own. So fast, Qin Yongyan sorted out his thoughts. After Qin Ruoying sat down quietly, he said slowly, Ying, do you still remember when you were young? You loved to ask where your mother went. Of course I remember. At that time, when I saw that everyone else had a mother, I couldn't help but feel a little disappointed, so I always pestered you to ask where my mother went. As Qin Ruoying spoke, she couldn't help but look sideways at the little guy. As a mother, she had the deepest understanding of this child's feelings. It's been hard on you. Qin Yongyan sighed softly. Then he changed the topic and said calmly, I didn't tell you before. In fact, your mother didn't die of illness. She died of old age. She didn't experience any pain. She just lay in my arms and quietly passed away. After saying that, Qin Yongyan smiled and made a hugging gesture, as if he was showing her the scene at that time. After Qin Ruoying heard his words, a very surprised expression appeared on her face. She even suspected that she had heard wrongly. Died of old age. Qin Ruoying's doubts didn't last long. Qin Yongyan smiled and explained to himself, yes, died of old age. Your mother's health has always been very good. She passed away only because she exhausted her lifespan. But it's a pity that, the year she passed away, she had just turned 36. At this point, Qin Yongyan couldn't suppress the surging emotions in his heart. Gradually, some indescribable expressions appeared on his face. There was sadness, reluctance, longing, and at the same time, pain and regret. After knowing you, there was no one else in the world. Just like going through the sea, how could I have mercy on the rivers? The person has passed away, but the thoughts remain forever. The hearts of father and daughter were connected. Qin Yongyan's heart was filled with a myriad of thoughts. Qin Ruoying's eyes also turned red. The atmosphere suddenly became much more oppressive. Seeing this, Chunshi gently held Qin Ruoying's hand. Then he asked thoughtfully, she exhausted her lifespan at 36 years old. Is there any secret behind this? Hearing this, Qin Yongyan immediately nodded and replied, I came to you today for this matter. Actually, Ying's mother. She used to be Xian Nu. After hearing the 2 words, Xian Nu's eyes. Obviously, she didn't like this name. Chunshi noticed Qin Ruoying's strange behavior, and gently squeezed her palm, indicating for her to relax and listen to Qin Yongyan first. Xian Nu's status in the village is very high. No matter what wish she has, everyone will try their best to fulfill it. And the reason why they receive such preferential treatment is mainly because most Xian Nu won't live past 40, so this is actually a form of compensation in disguise. After hearing Qin Yongyan's words, Qin Ruoying's face instantly turned ugly. Chunxi was already mentally prepared for this. He already knew a little about Siming Xiannu's problem from Bai Hong. Fortunately, he had already found Yingying's earth soul, so she shouldn't be like her mother, who had already passed away when she was still young. However, although her earth soul was found, Qin Ruoying still had symptoms of dizziness recently. This made Chunxi very anxious. After all, Bai Hong's knowledge was limited, so he couldn't be sure if Qin Ruoying still had any hidden dangers. Qin Yongyan suddenly mentioned Xiannu, so he must know something. Therefore, Chunxi immediately asked, "Is there any solution?" Hearing this, Qin Yongyan shook his head and couldn't help but sigh. "I don't know either. Xiannu of All Saints Valley has a short lifespan since ancient times. Everyone is already used to this." "No solution?" "Not really." Seeing Chunxi's anxious expression, Qin Yongyan couldn't help but feel happy for his daughter. With such a husband, what more could a woman ask for? However, now wasn't the time to talk about this, so after a slight pause he continued, "Xiannu of All Saints Valley has a short lifespan, but there's a place where Xiannu is an exception." "What place?" "Daiyu Island." Then Qin Yongyan told Chunxi all the information he knew. Siming Xiannu came from the Land of Legacy. In this world, there was more than one Land of Legacy. Floating Mist Mountain, Daiyu Island, All Saints Valley, Misty Pavilion, and the Wind Listening and Rain Observing Building. This mountain, island, valley, palace, and building were the 5 great land of legacy left behind by the ancient cultivators. Most of the cultivation legacies circulating in the world now came from these 5 places. Among them, Floating Mist Mountain had disappeared for a long time, and it was hard to find any trace of it. The Misty Pavilion and the Wind Listening and Rain Observing Building still existed, but there had been internal strife in these 2 places, which led to the loss of their legacies. They might not be able to provide any effective help. Therefore, the only place with the most complete legacies was Daiyu Island, which had always been closed to the outside world. In fact, these things weren't much of a secret. Anyone above the peak strength stage would know something about it. Perhaps only hidden experts like Qin Shi, who would rather deal with aunties in the wet market than communicate with cultivators, knew nothing about these things. Of course, the legacies of Daiyu Island weren't the main point. The main point was, their Xiannu had a long lifespan. This was definitely not a coincidence. There must be a way to prevent Xiannu's lifespan from being shortened in Daiyu Island. East Sea Immortal Mountain, Daiyu Island? Chunxi repeated this sentence, then suddenly thought of something. After looking at Qin Yongyan thoughtfully, he asked, "You went to Daiyu Island the day before yesterday, right?" But without waiting for Qin Yongyan to reply, Chunxi continued, minding her own business. "In other words, the injuries on your body are related to the people on this island?" Qin Yongyan naturally knew what Chunxi meant. However, Qin Yongyan didn't intend to take revenge, so he just shook his head with a smile and didn't respond. "Okay, I understand." Speaking of this, Chunxi suddenly turned to look at the little girl beside him, then waved at her. The little girl was quite sensible. As soon as she saw her grandfather, she directly threw the phone to the 2 brothers and ran over eagerly. "Grandpa, you're here." After the little girl sat in Qin Yongyan's arms for a while, Chunxi smiled and said to her, "Nian Nian, Mom and Dad are going on a long trip. Do you want to go with us? If you don't want to go, you can stay at home and accompany me. What do you think?" Hearing this, the little girl jumped up from Qin Yongyan's arms as if she had been electrocuted. Then, she shouted at the top of her lungs, "I want to go. I'll go wherever you go. Don't leave me behind." As she spoke, the little girl felt so wrong that she was about to cry. Seeing this, Chunxi could only reach out and pinch her little face, then smiled and comforted her. Okay. We won't leave you behind. How could Mom and Dad bear to leave you behind? If you want to go, we'll definitely take you there." After hearing Chunxi's words, the little girl's mood suddenly turned for the better. She couldn't help but smile and say, "Then where are we going?" Chapter 349. For a celestial being, it was naturally not difficult to ride the wind and enter the sea. Because the little fellow had to go with them, Chunxi did not choose to fly directly to Daiyu. Instead, He took the little fellow to Zhonghai by plane and borrowed a yacht from Ningzhonghua, treating it as a sea trip. A yacht self-driving tour. This made the little fellow very happy. Once she got on the yacht, she chattered nonstop. This yacht was the one Ningzhonghua used to entertain their family of 3 last time. It had 3 floors in total, and the decorations and configuration were extremely luxurious. Naturally, there was no need to bring any attendants with them on a self-driving tour. So Chunshi dismissed the staff on the yacht. As a result, there were only the 3 of them on this huge yacht. The sea breeze curled in spirals, and the sparkling waves sparkled. No matter how bright the sun was, it did not have the slightest taste of summer heat. The little fellow knelt on the observation deck on the top floor of the yacht, her small body constantly twisting with the sway of the yacht. She chewed on the fruit she had peeled for her while looking at the distant skyline. Her little face was about to bloom with joy. Suddenly, the little fellow seemed to have thought of something. She suddenly jumped into Qin Ruoying's arms, and then said very coquettishly, "Mama, the next time we go out to play, can we bring Wenwen and Mingming along? They really want to come out with me to play." Hearing this, Qin Ruoying rubbed her head and responded with a smile. "Sure, the next time we go out, I'll persuade Grandpa. If he agrees, we'll bring Wenwen and Mingming along, okay?" "Okay." The little fellow laughed excitedly, her eyes full of excitement and anticipation. However, this excitement soon disappeared. When the city's skyline gradually disappeared from the sea, there was only the boundless sea and the boundless sky left. It was difficult to even see a bird. The blue sea and white clouds. On the boundless sea, there was only one yacht moving forward alone. This was a very beautiful scene, but how could a 5-year-old child know how to appreciate it? Therefore, after the excitement passed, the little guy began to feel a little bored and lay on the sofa motionless. When the last trace of patience was worn out, and it raised its head to see the boundless sea, the little thing immediately flipped out. "Not fun at all. Not fun at all. I want to go back." Looking at her aggrieved face, those who didn't know better would think that she had been tricked by her parents. Chunshi, who was preparing lunch in the kitchen, heard her shout, so he quickly put down what he was doing and quickly walked to the balcony. It would have been fine if Chunshi hadn't come, but now that he had, the little thing immediately pouted and looked like it was about to burst into tears at any moment. Seeing this, Chunshi could only stride forward and pick up the little thing from the sofa. Then he patiently asked, "Nian, weren't you quite happy just now? Why are you suddenly angry?" "It's not fun here. I want to go back." The little thing's naughty temperament also came out. She twisted her body and kept shouting that she wanted to go home. In fact, she couldn't be blamed for being capricious. After all, the sea couldn't be compared to the mountains. In addition to all kinds of plants in the mountains, there were countless cute animals. But what about the sea? Other than the sea, there was only the sea. The sea was magnificent, but at the same time, it was also lonely. If the voyage was long, even the most experienced crew members could suffer from psychological problems, let alone a 5-year-old child like her. Chunshi roughly calculated the coordinates given by Qin Yongyan. In fact, the journey wasn't too far. At the current sailing speed, they would probably reach Diyu Island in the evening. Although it was only a 5 to 6 hour voyage, there was no internet or cartoons on the ship. Even if she played with her phone, without the company of the 2 brothers, the little thing would find it boring to play alone. Therefore, Chunshi pondered for a while and once again took out his trump card, magic tricks. "Nian, how about this? Daddy will show you a magic trick. I guarantee that you'll find it fun." Hearing this, the little thing, who was noisy just now, suddenly quieted down. She looked at Chunshi eagerly. Needless to say, her little eyes were full of anticipation. It couldn't be helped. After all, Chunshi's magic trick was already deeply ingrained in her heart. As long as the word magic trick was mentioned, it would instantly attract the little thing's full attention. "Nian, watch carefully." Chunshi pretended to smile mysteriously. After pinching the little thing's nose with his hand, he gently waved his arm toward the sea. The wind was gentle and the sun was bright. The blue sea was as soft as silk. When the breeze hit, there would be a slight ripple on the surface of the sea. It was unknown what method Chunshi used, but the moment he waved his hand, the originally calm sea suddenly stirred up waves. After noticing the change in the sea, the little thing subconsciously opened her eyes wide. However, before she could regain her senses, countless fish suddenly jumped from the bottom of the sea. Like the legendary fish leaping over the Dragon Gate, countless fish continuously jumped high from the sea. After drawing a beautiful semicircle in the air, they fell heavily into the water. The little thing opened her eyes wide, trying to see the fish's appearance clearly. However, she found that the fish were red, yellow, blue, and purple. The fish kept jumping from the sea, their colorful fish scales shining brightly under the sunlight. At first glance, it was as if a rainbow bridge had been built on the surface of the sea. Because there were too many fish, they kept jumping out of the sea and then fell back into the sea. As a result, there was a splash sound on the surface of the sea. It was as if it was raining, and the sound did not stop. For a moment, the whole world seemed to be lively again. The little thing was stunned. She opened her little mouth for a long time, but was unable to say a word. She was very satisfied with her reaction, so he gently patted her and asked with a smile, "How is it? Do you like this magic trick?" "I like it." "Then take a look here." As he spoke, she pointed below the yacht. The little thing stretched her neck and looked down. Only then did she find that there were suddenly many white and fat figures beside the yacht. "Dolphins! It's dolphins!" The little thing was excited. As a regular in children's picture books, dolphins were like stars in the eyes of the little thing, so she recognized them at a glance. The dolphins in the sea seemed to have heard her voice, so they immediately raised their heads and nodded at her. "Papa, they're saying hello to me." The little thing had never seen such a scene before. She immediately waved at the dolphins excitedly. The intelligence of dolphins was very high. The intelligence of an adult dolphin was even equivalent to that of a 6 or 7-year-old child. Chapter 350. Go up to the 9 heavens to catch the moon. Go down to the 5 seas to catch turtles. The sea was lonely because people couldn't see the bustling world below. The fish built a rainbow bridge, and the dolphins nodded at her. Although the trick was simple, it allowed the little girl to see a different sea, and it also calmed her restless heart. Finally, a bright smile appeared on the little girl's face again. She stood on the side of the boat, facing the sun. Her little face was rosy, like a ripe apple, looking especially sweet and attractive. When the breeze blew the waves, the crashing sound of the waves was like the most pleasant accompaniment in the world, accompanying the boat as it gradually sailed into the distance. While Chunchi's family of 3 was busy playing with the dolphins, the distant Diyu Island was also particularly lively. Today was the Jiang clan's Memorial Day. The Jiang clansmen on each island had to come to the main island and line up according to seniority at the foot of Qixia Peak. Under the leadership of the Arbiter of Fate Xian Nu, they followed the clan leader to worship their ancestors. After many years of reproduction and recuperation, the Jiang clan was thriving, regardless of whether it was the main branch or the side branches. If the main island was compared to a county, then the remaining 16 small islands were the towns and villages under the jurisdiction of the county. Today, the Jiang clansmen gathered on the main island of Diyu Island, as if all the people of the county had come to the county. From the dock to the top of Qixia Peak, it was densely packed with people. Qixia Peak wasn't high, and a bluestone road led from the top of the mountain to the nearest dock. Those who could stand on the bluestone road were the direct descendants of the Jiang clan, or the senior members of the side branches. And it was precisely because there were too many people that even the beach that would be flooded from time to time was filled with youthful juniors. On the entire island, regardless of whether they were young or old, there was a large ribbon tied around their heads, dressed in blue and black ceremonial robes, and clasped their hands in front of their chests. As long as the bell at the top of the mountain rang, everyone would bow to the top of Qixia Peak in unison. Dong, dong, the dull and distant sound of the bell continued to ring, startling the birds in the forest and causing them to fly into the sky. They then began to circle around the island. One person bowing might not feel much, but when thousands of people bowed at the same time, it gave off a solemn feeling. It was only when one was in the midst of it that they realized how insignificant they were. And this was the tradition of the Jiang clan. There were a total of 36 chimes. When the last chime rang out, a woman's voice suddenly resounded throughout the entire island. Now that the ceremony is over, please move to the North Island. Today's banquet will be held there. After hearing this, the solemn scene on the island was no longer as solemn as before. Everyone seemed to have been unshackled. They immediately gathered in groups of 2s and 3s, preparing to head to the North Island for dinner. But then the woman's voice suddenly sounded again. But this time, her tone was no longer as calm and graceful as before. Instead, it became a little anxious. Wait. Those of the Yuan generation and above, please wait. The patriarch has something important to discuss with all of you. Hearing this, the people on the island couldn't help but whisper to each other. Above the Yuan generation? That would mean that he was at least a grandfather. Did something big happen in the clan? Because the notice came too suddenly, no one reacted immediately. After the woman urged them again, all the Jiang clan members of the Yuan generation and above turned to climb the serene afterglow peak. On Qixia Peak, outside the Jiang clan's ancestral hall, during the sacrificial ceremony, people had to keep a certain distance from each other. Now that the sacrificial ceremony was over, the patriarch called everyone over. Naturally, the ancestral hall square was instantly filled with people. Among the people present, the lowest seniority was the same generation as the patriarch, Jiang Yuankue. One could imagine how important the matter the patriarch was going to talk about today was. But, after everyone from the Yuan generation and above arrived at the square, everyone learned an important piece of information from the others. The person who summoned everyone was not the patriarch, but the one who had been in seclusion for many years. Many people even thought that he had died long ago, but there was no funeral. Second granduncle, Jiang Zhengqing. Jiang Zhengqing's seniority was extremely high. The reason why he was called second granduncle was not because he was the second son, but because he was not of the direct bloodline. The so-called direct bloodline was the descendant of the first patriarch of the Jiang clan. The general meaning was that if a father had 2 sons, the eldest son could be called a direct descendant, and the second son could only be called a collateral descendant. Then, the eldest son of the eldest son would inherit the title of direct descendant, and the second son would become a collateral descendant, and so on, in order to maintain the purity of the direct bloodline. This kind of thinking might be difficult to understand with the thinking of modern people, but for a large clan like the Jiang clan, preserving the direct bloodline was the most important thing in the clan. This was the clan's rule, and also the ancestral teachings. Of course, from Chenqi's point of view, these people were actually a bunch of steely straight men who didn't understand genetics. More and more people gathered in the square. Everyone was discussing in low voices, one after another, so much so that the square was about to become a vegetable market. At this time, a woman who looked to be about 40 years old, but still had her charm intact, quickly walked out of the ancestral hall. The woman looked at the noisy crowd and immediately frowned. Silence. The woman only slightly opened her mouth, but her voice was like a thunderclap, instantly causing everyone's ears to buzz. Where is this place? How can you all be allowed to make a racket here? The woman looked around with a cold face, and wherever her gaze landed, everyone lowered their heads and listened obediently. For a moment, the whole place was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Seeing that no one was talking, the woman stood on the steps outside the ancestral hall, as if she was about to announce something. But just as she opened her mouth, before she could make a sound, a white figure suddenly descended from the sky and landed directly beside the huge bronze cauldron in the square. The woman instinctively wanted to scold that person, but when she saw the person's appearance, she immediately bowed and said, "Greetings to second granduncle." Hearing this, everyone looked sideways. Then they followed the woman's example, turned around and bowed respectfully to that person, and shouted in unison, "Greetings to second granduncle." This scene was very similar to an ancient emperor going to court. After everyone finished speaking, the second granduncle, who was the center of attention, smiled and said, "Everyone get up. I'm not the clan leader, so why are you so respectful?" "Thank you, second granduncle." After hearing the second granduncle's response, Everyone straightened up and looked straight at the ancestral hall. At this time, Jiang Yuankui, who had been staying in the ancestral hall, slowly walked out of the main hall as if he had just heard the noise. Although he was the clan leader, his seniority was much lower, so he had to bow respectfully to the second granduncle like everyone else. Greetings to second granduncle. However, although Jiang Yuankui bowed to the second granduncle did not respond to him. After the second granduncle looked at Jiang Yuankui up and down, he suddenly seemed to think of something, and threw out an earth-shattering sentence. How long have I been in seclusion? Even the clan leader has changed. Is your father dead? Chapter 351. Is your father dead? Even a stranger wouldn't greet someone's parents like that, let alone an elder in the clan. Therefore, no matter how shrewd Jiang Yuankui was, he couldn't help but change his expression after hearing his words. No matter what, he was still the head of the clan. What was the difference between the seemingly cordial greeting from his second granduncle and slapping his face in public? He simply didn't care about his identity as the head of the clan. The atmosphere instantly became much more oppressive. The sun was still shining brightly, but it gave people the feeling that a storm was coming. On one side was the current head of the Jiang clan. On the other side was the extremely senior and powerful second granduncle. Everyone present was old and experienced. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, they immediately buried their heads and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They were afraid that the fire at the city gate would affect them. No matter what, Jiang Yuankui was still the head of the clan. Even if he was provoked by his second granduncle, he couldn't lose his composure because of this. Therefore, after taking a deep breath, Jiang Yuankui forcibly suppressed the anger in his heart. Then he forced a smile and said to his second granduncle, "Thank you for your concern, second granduncle. My father's health is still good. He's currently deducing the way of the celestial being with many ancestors on Heron Island." Hearing this, his second granduncle suddenly chuckled. As if he thought of something, he first shook his head. Then, as if he was talking to himself, he casually muttered, "A bunch of old farts." Although his voice was soft, everyone present wasn't a cultivator. How could this sentence escape their ears? However, everyone acted as if they didn't hear it. Even the woman who had signaled for everyone to be silent seemed to have lost her hearing. She stood in front of the ancestral hall with her head lowered, and her eyes looking straight ahead. Everyone present was silent. Jiang Yuankui frowned and remained silent for a while. Finally, he raised his head and said in a slightly cold tone, "Second granduncle, you've just come out of seclusion and you're already in a hurry to call the clan meeting. May I ask if there's something you want to discuss with everyone?" As he spoke, Jiang Yuankui deliberately emphasized the word old. It was probably to remind his second granduncle that he was the one who should die of old age the most on Daiyu Island. In fact, Jiang Zhengqing, who was respectfully called second granduncle, was not old at all. Judging from his appearance, he didn't look like an old man at all. He looked like a young man in his early 30s who could almost be considered a youth. Over 200 years had passed, yet the old fellow had actually relied on his extraordinary cultivation to allow him to return to his youth, and he was like a sick tree that had come back to life and revealed extremely exuberant vitality once more. How could this not cause others to arouse reverence towards him? When Earth's heaven and Earth spirit chi was so scarce, the Jiang clan's collateral branch still gave birth to such a stunning figure. It had to be said that this was the Jiang clan's fortune. However, at the same time, this was also the tragedy of the Jiang clan's direct descendants. The direct descendants of the Jiang family had the best resources on Daiyu Island, but none of them were comparable to the second granduncle. That was why Jiang Yuankui was being bullied by the second granduncle, and he could only swallow his pride and swallow his pride. Jiang Zhengqing appeared to be standing on the ground, but in reality, he was still several inches away from the ground. After hearing Jiang Yuankui's words, he suddenly laughed out loud. Then, he flew straight to the top of the bronze cauldron, and looked down at the crowd in the square from above. Looking at the solemn hall and the useless fellows in the square, Jiang Zhengqing's heart was suddenly filled with pride. He couldn't help but roar out loud. Riches and honor are like a dream. All roots are not lacking, But true faith is hard to come by. Worth as much as it comes to hear the wondrous method, not as rare as the superior Sirius epiphyllum? Everyone thinks that the superior Sirius epiphyllum is a legendary item, but they don't know that on our Diu Island, there is a budding superior Sirius epiphyllum that has been nurtured for 3,000 years. When he heard the word superior Sirius epiphyllum, Jiang Yuankui's face immediately darkened. Seeing that second granduncle seemed to want to continue, Jiang Yuankui no longer cared about anything else. He couldn't help but shout angrily, "How dare you, second granduncle?" Hearing this, Jiang Zhengqing seemed to have heard a joke and couldn't help but laugh wildly. Ha 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 ha. His laughter was like a thunderclap, instantly resounding throughout the entire serene afterglow peak, then gradually spread out, and finally reached the ears of everyone on the island. Everyone was preparing to go to the North Island to eat when they suddenly heard such laughter. So they quickly turned back to look at Serene Afterglow Peak. Many of the bolder ones even dashed madly towards Serene Afterglow Peak. They had already made up their minds that even if they would be punished by the discipline hall, they would still go up the mountain today to watch the show. Jiang Zhengqing laughed for a long time. While he was laughing, he was also releasing an invisible pressure to the surroundings. Those with lower cultivation bases in the crowd couldn't bear this pressure, and directly knelt on the ground. Even Jiang Yuankui was forced to release his true qi to try to resist this pressure. Jiang Zhengqing's laughter came to an abrupt end. After sweeping his gaze over the crowd, Jiang Zhengqing finally set his gaze on Jiang Yuankui. Then he slowly opened his mouth and said, "When the old ancestor left, he planted this Adumbra flower and left behind a prophecy. This flower belongs to the destined person. 3,000 years have passed, and this superior Sirius epiphyllum has also welcomed its time to bloom." Then this old man would like to ask, "Who is the destined person for this superior Sirius epiphyllum? Is it you? Is it you? Or is it you?" As he spoke, Jiang Zhengqing stretched out his hand and pointed at the Jiang clan members below. When they saw this, the few people he pointed at immediately knelt on the ground and said with flattering expressions, "Second granduncle is now the most powerful person in the Jiang clan, so you must be the destined person for this superior Sirius epiphyllum." That's right. The Jiang clan has been passed down for more than 3,000 years, and coincidentally, second granduncle was born, so this superior Sirius epiphyllum finally welcomed its flowering. I believe second granduncle is the destined person for this flower. This flower is blessed by the ancestor, and blessed by the heavens. Jiang Yuankui stood in front of the ancestral hall's doors, and watched as these people echoed Jiang Zhengqing's words. His expression was as ugly as it could be. The superior Sirius epiphyllum was a rare treasure left behind by the Jiang clan's ancestors, and there was only one of it in the world. Although he had already expected second granduncle to be interested in this superior Sirius epiphyllum, he did not expect second granduncle to be so direct. He did not even have the slightest intention of hiding it. He was just short of directly going to Heron Island and plucking this flower. He was extremely arrogant. While Jiang Yuankui was furious, a yacht passed through Diu Island's mountain guarding array without any hindrance and headed straight for the main island. Chen Shi stood at the bow of the yacht, and after looking up at Serene Afterglow Peak in the distance, the corners of his mouth suddenly curled into a faint smile. Chapter 352. The sunset glow was always extremely beautiful. At the end of the sea, a huge kumquat-like setting sun stood above the horizon of the evening. A thin mist held up the perfectly round reddish gold. Looking from afar, there was only this shining golden wheel left at the intersection of the sea and the sky. As the golden wheel continued to fall, the orange-red sky was gradually dyed with some indigo, blurring Diu Island's figure in the sunset glow. This scene was extremely similar to the beautiful artistic conception described by Bai Juyi in the Song of the Mu River. The setting sun spreads out on the water, half of the river is red, and the other half is red. Unfortunately, although the setting sun was beautiful, it always gave people a feeling of loneliness. Perhaps it was because she had been on the boat for too long. The little girl was curled up on the sofa and fiddling with her phone in boredom. When Qin Ruoying brought a peeled apple to her mouth, she opened her mouth lazily and slowly took a bite. Looking at the cute way her little mouth puffed up, coupled with her salted fish-like expression, this little thing was just short of hanging a sign around her neck with the words, "Nothing to live for" written on it. Suddenly, the little thing seemed to have heard something. She sat up from the sofa and leaned against the railing, stretching her neck to look around. Whoa! Looking at the Diu Islands that suddenly appeared in front of her, the little thing's eyes suddenly widened. Mama! Look! An island! There's an island here! The island that suddenly appeared was like a power bank, instantly charging the little thing who had been on standby for a long time. Mama, I want to go there to play. As she spoke, the little thing couldn't wait to jump off the sofa and step up the stairs to leave the balcony. Seeing this, Qin Ruoying could only put down the fruit in her hand and follow her to the bow deck. Chunxi was looking at the top of Qixia Peak thoughtfully. Seeing this, the little thing timidly crept toward him. This little thing was mischievous. It wanted to scare Chunxi, but it didn't expect that its little trick had already been seen through by Chunxi. Therefore, when she came behind Chunxi and was about to open her mouth to make a sound, Chunxi reached her first and lifted her up from the ground. Nian Nian, you've got guts. You even dare to come and scare Daddy. Chunxi held her in his arms and shook her a few times, but it was as if he had poked the little thing's laughing acupoint. Immediately, she let out a series of giggles. After the father and daughter played around for a while, the little fellow leaned on Chunxi's shoulder, pointed to Diu Island, and said coquettishly, "Papa, can we go up and play?" "Of course, when the boat docks, Daddy will take you up to have some fun." After hearing Chunxi's affirmative answer, the little fellow excitedly gestured for Chunxi to put her down. Then, she ran to the railing and looked at Diu Island in front of her. But as she looked, she realized that there was something wrong with this place. Because there were people on the island, and there were many of them. These people stood on the shore and kept pointing at the boat. As the boat approached, the surrounding scenery and the expressions on the people's faces became clearer. The little fellow was not used to the feeling of being the center of attention. When she realized that everyone was looking at her, she quickly jumped back into Chunxi's arms and shrunk her head, unwilling to show herself. Looking at the boat slowly docked at the dock of the main island, the Jiang clansmen present were very surprised. Because many of the Jiang clansmen had never seen a boat before, when they suddenly saw such a gorgeous boat, they couldn't help but surround it and start whispering to each other. It was not that there were no foreign boats on Diu Island, but they were still very few. So many of the Jiang clansmen had only heard about it, but had never seen it with their own eyes. This boat, it was indeed very beautiful. Today was the Jiang clan ceremony, so most of the Jiang clansmen had come to the main island. Because this was the first time they saw a living outsider, they naturally felt like they were watching a giant panda. Outsider? How rare. After securing the boat's anchor, Chunxi carried the little fellow in one arm, and held Qin Ruoying in the other. Just like that, they slowly disembarked from the boat under everyone's gaze. The little fellow was afraid of strangers, so she buried her head in Chunxi's shoulder, and peeked her head out from time to time to look around. Her cowering expression made her look like a frightened ostrich. After all, this was someone else's territory, so Chunxi stood at the dock and waited for a while. Then, a man who looked to be in his 30s quickly walked up to them. The man saw that Chunxi's family of 3 did not look like bad people, so he could not figure out Chunxi's background. After all, there was a large array around Diu Island, so outsiders could not find the location of Diu Island. Since these 3 people could enter the island, they must have been invited by the people on the island. Out of this consideration, the man's tone carried some politeness. He asked politely, "Today is the day of our Jiang clan ceremony. May I ask why Sir has come to the island?" Hearing that, Chunxi also replied politely, "I was invited by the clan leader to attend the banquet today. Please lead the way, sir." Invited by the clan leader? After hearing Chunxi's reply, the man could not help but be stunned for a moment. He really did not know what to do. He was not in charge of reception in the first place. The reason why he came to ask was because the Yuan generation and above had all gone to Qixia Peak. There were not many people in the port who were older than him. A clan meeting was being held on Qixia Peak, But this person in front of him said that he was invited by the clan leader to attend the meeting. Thinking of this, the man could not help but look troubled. Seeing this, Chunshi added with a serious expression, "I was invited by the clan leader to attend the meeting. The clan leader must have his reasons for choosing today. If sir doesn't know much about this, please lead the way and let me meet the clan leader first." Chunshi's words were methodical, but in fact, he didn't even know the name of the Jiang clan leader, so how could he have received an invitation from the clan leader? He just casually made up a story, but he did not expect this young man to not have the slightest doubt. How fast was Chunshi's reaction? Seeing the other party's reaction, of course, he had to take advantage of the situation and fool him. He was prepared to meet the clan leader first. Anyway, he was not afraid of being kicked out. "All right, please follow me, sir." Perhaps it was because Chunshi was holding the child, so the man was not less wary of him. After thinking for a moment, he turned sideways and made a gesture of invitation. "Thank you, sir." Then, the family of three slowly climbed up Qixia Peak along the stone path in the mountain under the guidance of the man. The little fellow poked her head out and kept looking at the surrounding Jiang clan members. She seemed to be very curious about their clothes, but because these people were all looking at her, she did not make a sound. The little fellow was afraid of strangers. Finally, the man led Chunshi's family to the top of the mountain. After the family of three came to the edge of the square, the little fellow noticed that the atmosphere in this place seemed to be a bit wrong, so she raised her head curiously and began to look around. But when she put her eyes on the center of the square, her little red mouth immediately opened into an O shape. Chapter 353. That person was flying in the sky. The crisp and melodious child's voice also carried a kind of surprise and curiosity. But the moment this sentence sounded, it was no less than throwing a grenade in everyone's ears. With a bang sound, everyone present was shocked. Everyone couldn't help but look back. When they saw the little guy who suddenly made the noise, their eyes showed a bit of a blank look. Where did this child come from? This scene was very similar to a middle school class, when the teacher was leading everyone to recite classical Chinese. The whole class was reading excitedly, but there was an untactful student who rushed into the classroom with a piece of bread in his mouth, directly interrupting everyone's recitation. When everyone stopped to watch a good show, they shockingly discovered that this student who was late was not in their class at all. The students were dumbfounded. What kind of experience would it be to be a teacher? If Jiang Zhengqing was the teacher, then Chunshi's family was naturally the late students. The Jiang clan attached great importance to the ancestral rules. Not to mention that the Qixia Peak was holding a clan meeting. Even in normal times, the ancestral square was not a place where just anyone could come. The man who led the way was still too young. When he saw that the atmosphere in the square was a bit strange, he froze in place and didn't know what to do. What else could he do? Interrupting the clan meeting caused all the elders to look back at him. Could it be that he had to brace himself and bring the outsider to the clan leader at this time? He really didn't have the guts. Seeing the man standing there in a daze, an old man next to him couldn't help but scold him in a low voice. "Fengla, what are you doing? Hurry up and take him away." Hearing this, the man named Jiang Fengla suddenly realized what was going on. He hurriedly bowed in the direction of Jiang Yuankui, and then tried to pull Chunshi away in a fluster. But how could Chunshi be so easy to get close to? Jiang Fengla just stretched out his hand, but it was as if he touched an air wall. No matter how hard he tried, his hand couldn't move forward an inch. Seeing this, Jiang Fengla couldn't help but be anxious. He couldn't help but roar in a low voice. "Hey, what are you doing? Come with me and get out of here." Jiang Fengla was so anxious that he was sweating, but Chunshi turned a deaf ear to this. He raised his head and glanced at Jiang Zhengqing, who was in mid-air. Then he held the little girl in one hand and Qin Ruoying in the other, and slowly walked to the center of the square, as if he was taking a stroll. "I'm really sorry to have disturbed you all. If I had known that you were having a meeting, I would have waited at the foot of the mountain for a while. But since I'm already here, it's not like I can go back now. Why don't you all take a break first and continue the discussion later?" As they walked, Chunshi kept nodding to the Jiang clan members on both sides. He seemed to be walking very slowly, but in fact, in just a few words, he had passed through the huge square and arrived at the steps outside the ancestral hall. Towards this stranger who had suddenly appeared, Jiang Yuankui was also very puzzled. He glanced at Jiang Zhengqing's expression from the corner of his eye, only to find that Jiang Zhengqing didn't seem to recognize this person either. This was strange. Second great-uncle had cornered everyone and tried to force him to hand over the Adumbra flower. This was the most critical moment, so why would a stranger suddenly appear? Moreover, this person seemed to have brought his wife and child with him. What was he trying to do? Jiang Yuankui frowned and didn't say anything. The whole place was silent. Even Jiang Zhengqing, who was in the sky, couldn't help but look down at Chen Shi. Under such a situation where everyone was watching, the little girl in Chen Shi's arms suddenly made a sound. They saw that she was leaning on Chen Shi's shoulder and looking up at Jiang Zhengqing for a while. In the end, she couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Papa, why can he fly?" Her voice was very soft, but it reached everyone's ears without missing a word. That uncle is fixing the electric pole. In fact, he has a rope hanging on his back. Because it's too far away, you can't see the rope, so you think he's flying. Oh, I know. Because it's too far away, the things I see are very, very small. So small that I can't see them. Chen Shi smiled and pinched the tip of her nose, and then explained in a low voice. After understanding the reason, the little girl couldn't help but grin. However, she had just laughed a few times when she suddenly saw the woman on the steps give her a fierce glare. There was undisguised disgust in the woman's eyes. The little girl, who had never been glared at like this, was a little scared on the spot. So, the little girl suddenly shrank back into Chen Shi's arms like a frightened quail, and didn't dare to show her head again. Seeing the father and daughter whispering as if there was no one else around, the woman on the steps couldn't bear it anymore. So she stepped forward and scolded Chen Shi harshly. "How dare you? This is the forbidden area of the Jiang clan's ancestral temple. How can an outsider be trespassed? Why aren't you taking him away?" With the woman's order, many clansmen of the Jiang clan belonging to the commandment hall immediately rushed out of the ancestral temple, showing that they were going to take down Chen Shi and his family. But at this time, Chen Shi suddenly turned his head and looked around. After confirming that Jiang Yuankui was the person with the highest status, he looked at him and asked calmly, "May I ask if you are the current clan leader of the Jiang clan?" Jiang Yuankui's face was cold and he didn't answer. Chen Shi reached out and touched the back of the little girl's head. After letting the little girl lean on his shoulder, he said lightly, "I came uninvited today mainly to ask for an explanation from you." Ask for an explanation? As soon as he said this, Jiang Yuankui reached out and stopped the crowd. He frowned and asked, "What explanation?" "A few days ago, someone came to your island to ask for advice about the Si Ming Xian Nu. May I ask if clan leader Jiang has any impression of this?" After hearing this, Jiang Yuankui's heart suddenly thumped, and there was a subtle change in the way he looked at Chen Shi, the person in front of him. Could it be the legendary Mr. Chen? So young. But why did he choose to come to the island today? It was too sudden. Jiang Yuankui was shocked and doubtful. He really couldn't figure out Chen Shi's identity, but he still pretended to be calm and didn't show any abnormalities. After sneaking a glance at Jiang Zhengqing in the sky, Jiang Yuankui suddenly had some thoughts in his mind. So after a light cough, he looked at Chen Shi and said in a low voice, "There is indeed such a thing. I'm very sorry that I can't answer his questions. But you have to understand that the Jiang clan only accepted outsiders out of friendship, and definitely not out of duty. If you blame me because of this, isn't it a bit unreasonable?" Jiang Yuankui put on a righteous look. It seemed that he really wanted to reason with Chen Shi. However, after hearing this, Chen Shi couldn't help but laugh. He then replied coldly, "Whether I help you or not, I naturally won't blame you because of this. But do you know, that person is my father-in-law?" Hearing this, even with Jiang Yuankui's shrewdness, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes slightly. It's really him. After confirming Chen Shi's identity, Jiang Yuankui was suddenly happy and almost laughed out loud. There was an old saying, "It's better to come at the right time than to come early." He didn't think that such a good thing would actually happen to him. There would be a good show to watch in a while. Jiang Yuankui resisted the urge to laugh in his heart. He was like an old fox that had become a spirit, standing on the stairs. Only his tail was not exposed. Chunshi felt that something was wrong with him, but didn't think too much about it. So he continued to say, Mr. Father-in-law came here from Shangjing with a heart full of sincerity, just to ask the Jiang clan to answer his questions. But not only did you not help, you even hurt him. Then why don't you tell me? Chapter 354. Ask for an explanation. Who is this guy? He's so arrogant. Isn't he afraid of biting his tongue? As soon as Chunshi finished speaking, everyone couldn't help but start whispering to each other. At this time, Jiang Zhengqing, who had been flying in the air, suddenly seemed to have thought of something. He instantly descended from the sky and appeared in front of Chunshi. Jiang Zhengqing frowned and looked at Chunshi, then suddenly asked, You're the so-called Mr. Chen? Hearing this, Chunshi looked at him up and down, then slowly replied, I don't know who the Mr. Chen you're talking about is. But my surname is Chen. After hearing this answer, Jiang Zhengqing suddenly felt like he had discovered a new continent. He couldn't help but nod and chuckle. Ha, interesting. Jiang Zhengqing put on a look of interest. But what he didn't expect was, Chunshi didn't have any intention of paying attention to him. Seeing that Jiang Zhengqing was blocking his line of sight, Chunshi slightly tilted his head, walked past Jiang Zhengqing, and said to Jiang Yuankui, who was on the stairs, Leader Jiang, I'll be honest with you. If you don't give me an explanation today, then I'll have to give you one. His tone sounded very casual, like he was chatting with a friend. There was no aggression in his tone. However, the meaning behind his words was a little aggressive, and there was a feeling of being unforgiving when he was in the right. But as the leader of the Jiang family, Jiang Yuankui didn't immediately respond after being questioned by Chunshi in such a rude manner. This was because he knew that with his second granduncle's arrogant personality, he would definitely jump out to take the blame. As expected, the result was just as Jiang Yuankui expected. As soon as Chunshi finished speaking, Jiang Zhengqing, who was already annoyed at being ignored, immediately snorted and said coldly, I want to know, what kind of explanation are you going to give me? After hearing this, Chunshi finally saw Jiang Zhengqing. After slowly shifting his gaze from Jiang Yuankui to Jiang Zhengqing, Chunshi frowned and said, It's you? Hearing this, Jiang Zhengqing laughed out loud as if he had heard a joke. Even though Daiyu Island is isolated, it's very well informed. Mr. Chen rose like a comet. In just a year, his reputation has spread throughout Huaxia and even the entire cultivation world. A few days ago, Mr. Chen cut down Su Feng of the Dark Ghost sect in front of countless people at the peak of Taihang. Such a miraculous skill. How is it different from the land immortals? There are rumors that Wu Lian even wanted to give the long-vacant chief seat to Mr. Chen, but he was rejected by Mr. Chen. At this point, Jiang Zhengqing looked at the little guy in Chenshi's arms with a faint smile, then continued, This old man has lived for hundreds of years, and this is the first time I've seen such an amazing person. Naturally, I can't help but yearn for it. Today I've seen it for myself. This old man suddenly understands what it means by seeing is believing. I don't think anyone would believe that the famous Mr. Chen is actually a midwife who doesn't forget to carry his child wherever he goes. Ha 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 ha. By the end of his sentence, Jiang Zhengqing was already out of breath from laughing, as if the words Mr. Chen were the biggest joke in the world. The term midwife had to be mentioned here. The midwife system was a special product of a matriarchal society. Not only did it exist in Huaxia, but even the Indians living in the Amazon River once had such a custom. The so-called midwife system was that during a woman's childbirth, a man would be on the side to simulate the wife's childbirth. And after the wife gave birth, he would replace the wife to go through confinement. The real pregnant woman had to go out to work after giving birth to the child. And she also had to take care of the husband who was in confinement. This was because when human civilization was just born, women were the masters, and men had to obey women. Later, as the status of men gradually increased, the entire social system began to change from a matriarchal society to a patriarchal society. Men wanted to replace women in everything, including the ability to give birth to children. That was why the midwife system was created. It was just to prove that men could do everything that women could do, and they could even do it better. From today's perspective, this kind of behavior was indeed absurd. But from a historical perspective, men trying to replace women to give birth to children was actually a symbol of the progress of human civilization. The replacement of the matriarchal system by the patriarchal system was a major advancement in the history of human civilization. In summary, Jiang Zhengqing was actually beating around the bush to humiliate Chen Shi. The Jiang family members present naturally understood Jiang Zhengqing's words. They did not have a good impression of this outsider who had suddenly appeared. Seeing that their second granduncle had expressed his opinion, of course, they had to agree with him and humiliate him as if they were looking at a monkey. Therefore, there was a burst of enthusiastic laughter in the square. Looking at their exaggerated expressions, it seemed that they were competing to see who could laugh louder. Jiang Yuankui stood on the steps and silently scanned the crowd. He did not laugh, and he did not dare to laugh. In fact, Qin Yongyan was indeed injured by his second granduncle. But if he had not played a trick, how would Jiang Zhengqing, who had just come out of seclusion, know that Mr. Chen's father-in-law had come to Daiyu Island? As the head of the family, Jiang Yuankui's cultivation was far inferior to Jiang Zhengqing's. But in other aspects, even 10 Jiang Zhengqings could not compare to 1 Jiang Yuankui. Chapter 355. The yacht was right below Qixia Peak. When the green light shot out of the yacht, it almost instantly reached the peak of Qixia Peak. Jiang Zhengqing was standing about 4 or 5 meters away from Chen Shi. Seeing that Chen Shi had suddenly turned hostile and attacked, a half-smile suddenly appeared on his face. For someone as arrogant as Jiang Zhengqing, the only reason he didn't attack Chen Shi directly was that he wanted to retreat in order to advance. After all, Daiyu Island was the territory of the Jiang clan. If he directly attacked Chen Shi, an outsider, even if he won in the end, others would think that he was bullying Chen Shi by outnumbering him, and had an unfair advantage. But if Chen Shi made the first move and forced him to fight back, who would dare to say half a word of gossip? As long as he defeated Mr. Chen fair and square, he, Jiang Zhengqing, would be the undisputed #1 person in the world, enough to become the chief of the Wulian clan. It had to be said that Jiang Zhengqing's idea was very good. As far as Jiang Zhengqing knew, cultivators would more or less have some way to hide their aura. Just like in martial arts novels, the lighter one's footsteps were, the higher one's martial arts skills were. Because everything a cultivator owned came from the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, to estimate a person's true cultivation level, one only needed to look at the fluctuation of spiritual chi around the person. When a cultivator stood still, their aura hiding technique could cover most of the fluctuation of spiritual chi. So even if Chen Shi didn't have any fluctuation of spiritual chi, Jiang Zhengqing didn't find it strange at all. But when the green light streaked across the sky like a bolt of lightning, Jiang Zhengqing suddenly realized that he might have thought too simply of the situation. The green light was only 3 feet long, but in the process of flying, it was like a meteor streaking across the sky, leaving behind a slender green thread in the dusk sky. Look, what's that? The appearance of the green light immediately attracted everyone's attention. Immediately after, a sentence suddenly popped up in the minds of many well-informed Jiang clan clansmen. The peak of Taihang, flying immortal with 1 sword. A flying sword? This man is really Mr. Chen. Before the crowd had time to be surprised, the green light was like a bolt of lightning, striking down on Jiang Zhengqing, who was in the middle of the square. In the process of chopping down, an extremely surging wave of spirit chi suddenly erupted from the green light. Then, with the green light as the tip of the cone, a cone-shaped aura field visible to the naked eye instantly formed. However, in an instant, the green light was like a huge drill, smashing down with an unstoppable momentum. After feeling the huge amount of energy contained in the green light, Jiang Zhengqing's expression couldn't help but change slightly. He no longer looked as arrogant as before. He had really been careless this time. Seeing the ferocious green light, Jiang Zhengqing could only quickly raise his arms in an attempt to block the sword. Therefore, just as the green light was about to hit Jiang Zhengqing, a dazzling golden light immediately appeared around him. The 6 trigram lines calming mind, embracing the yuan and guarding one. From afar, Jiang Zhengqing looked like he was trapped in a golden egg. As for the green light, it was like a high-speed rotating drill bit that directly crashed into the shell of the egg. Bang! As soon as the two came into contact, an extremely dazzling light lit up the top of Qixia Peak. The light was so bright that it almost lit up half of the sky. The collision of the moves set off an intense turbulence, so much so that a cyclone of energy suddenly appeared in the middle of the square. The cyclone spun wildly, and the strong traction force shattered everything around it. It uprooted the square's floor and the surrounding trees, and then lifted them all into the sky. Facing such a powerful wave of energy, even Jiang Yuankui had no choice but to quickly retreat into the ancestral hall, not to mention the other Jiang clansmen present. Among them, the weaker ones were almost instantly lifted into the sky by this cyclone, and then heavily smashed to the foot of the mountain. If it weren't for the protection of the Jiang clan's ancestral hall, it would probably be turned into ruins in this storm. Finally, the storm gradually subsided, although it was still a scene of flying sand and rolling stones, and the sky was dark. Some things could still be vaguely seen. Jiang Yuankui hid in the ancestral hall. At this moment, there was only one thought left in his mind: it's over. Just from the momentum of this sword, Jiang Yuankui realized that he and Jiang Yuankui might have been wrong. This Mr. Chen in front of him was definitely not a soft persimmon, and it was even more impossible for him to become a stepping stone for the Jiang clan. One had to know that no matter how he and Jiang Zhengqing fought, they were both clan relatives with the same blood flowing in their bodies, so no matter who won or lost, it was acceptable for the entire Jiang clan. But if Jiang Zhengqing was killed by Mr. Chen today, the fall of a heavenly man was unacceptable for Jiang Yuankui, and even the entire Jiang clan. Therefore, after coming back to his senses, Jiang Yuankui almost instantly rushed out of the ancestral hall, and then shouted toward the square, "Stop! It's all a misunderstanding. Please stop, both of you. Let's talk nicely." Jiang Yuankui roared at the top of his lungs. He was really afraid that the two of them would really fight to the death. And if they really had to fight to the death, how would he end it then? However, when the energy dissipated and the dust settled, Jiang Yuankui suddenly realized Jiang Zhengqing was actually still flying around the square. As for that green light, it was like a cat playing with a mouse hanging behind Jiang Zhengqing at a distance, and from time to time, it would stick to Jiang Zhengqing to scare him. What was going on? Jiang Yuankui was stunned by what was happening in front of him. The reality was not what he thought at all. How was this a lose-lose situation? Looking at the situation, it seemed that second granduncle was beaten up unilaterally. In fact, before Chen Shi made his move, he had already set up a small illusion array around himself, so what the little fellow saw was different from what others saw. In the little fellow's eyes, the square was still the square, and the strange uncle was still the strange uncle. However, the strange uncle in front of her was like a swing, constantly floating around in the air. Seeing this, the little fellow could not help but ask in confusion, "Papa, what is that uncle doing?" "Oh, look. That uncle violated the rules when he was fixing the electric pole, causing the rope at one end to loosen, so he can't maintain his balance in the air, and can only swing around in the air. Nian, don't think that this is fun. Think about it, this is such a high place. What if he accidentally falls? Would he be like Juzi, and turn into a pile of mud? So don't climb so high in the future, it's very dangerous, do you understand?" As Chen Shi controlled the green light to chase after Jiang Zhengqing, he did not forget to educate the little fellow. The little fellow originally thought that swinging in the air was very interesting, but after hearing Chen Shi's vivid description, a nervous expression appeared on her little face. She quickly shook her head and muttered, "I know. I don't want to climb so high." "Good girl." Chen Shi smiled and rubbed the little fellow's head, then looked at Jiang Yuankui. After looking Jiang Yuankui up and down, he suddenly laughed. "Misunderstanding?" Hearing this, Jiang Yuankui immediately nodded like he was pounding garlic, and hurriedly replied, Yes, Mr. Chen, this is all a misunderstanding. Please be magnanimous." "All right, if you say it's a misunderstanding, then it's a misunderstanding. Before Jiang Yuankui could finish his sentence, Qinshi directly interrupted him. However, right after that, Qinshi looked thoughtfully at Jiang Zhengqing, who was being chased by the green light, and then suddenly asked, "Leader Jiang, Daiyu Island is so remote, I wonder if you've seen a movie?" "Movie? What movie?" "Young and Dangerous." Ah. Jiang Yuankui was stunned for a moment, completely unable to understand what Qinshi was talking about. Seeing his confused look, Qinshi did not keep him in suspense, and directly explained with a smile, "There's a line in Young and Dangerous that I really like. You have to keep your word when you're out there." Even though Qinshi had only recovered 70% of his strength, there was still a huge gap between him and Jiang Zhengqing. The two of them could not be compared at all. Of course, this gap was actually the gap between Earth and Heavenly Spiral. It did not mean that Jiang Zhengqing was really useless. Therefore, even though Qinshi's cultivation had long since surpassed the entire Earth, he would not be arrogant and condescending because of this. It was better to be humble as a person. However, since Jiang Zhengqing was determined to court death, Qinshi naturally would not show mercy. Otherwise, how could he account to Yingying? His father-in-law was being bullied. As a son-in-law, he naturally had to stand up for him. Therefore, no matter how Jiang Yuankui tried to smooth things over, Qinshi turned a blind eye to it. Today he was determined to kill Jiang Zhengqing on the spot. However, what Qinshi did not expect was, the moment the flying sword shot into Jiang Zhengqing's back, a burst of white light suddenly appeared on Jiang Zhengqing's body. At the same time, a deep and old voice suddenly sounded on the island. "Since he is powerless to resist, I hope that Mr. Chen can be merciful on account of your wife and spare his life for the time being." After the old man's voice sounded, the bronze cauldron that had been standing in the middle of the square started to tremble slightly. Immediately after, a golden light suddenly shot out from the bronze cauldron. The light shot straight into the sky. It was as if a crack had been torn open in the dusky sky in an instant. Under the contrast of the golden light, one could even clearly see the rolling clouds in the sky. Seeing this, Qinshi could not help but frown as he looked at the bronze cauldron in the middle of the square. A faint sneer appeared on his face. This scene, it was really similar. After the golden light shot into the sky, a fluorescent golden barrier opened up like an umbrella, instantly enveloping the 17 small islands. The sky suddenly lit up, and the array was activated. For so many years, the Jiang clan had never truly activated the array. Now that it was suddenly activated, everyone was immediately scared out of their wits, so much so that the island was full of panicked shouts. Seeing that the other party had suddenly assumed such a posture, Qinshi gently handed the little fellow in his arms to Qin Ruoying, then waved his hand towards the sky. Then, the green light flew straight back to his hand as if it had a mind of its own. Since the other party wanted to fight, then he could only accompany them to the end. After all, it was not certain who was afraid of whom. You are the ones who are stirring up trouble, and you are also the ones who want to make peace. You dare to come to this broken place, and everything is up to you. Is there really such a good thing in the world? You can't really think. This broken array can stop me. After responding coldly to the sky, Qinshi held the long sword in his hand, and turned to look at Jiang Zhengqing, who had just fallen from the sky and was now lying on the ground, panting heavily. Because of the protection of the array, the sword just now did not directly kill him. However, it did not matter. At most, he would just follow up with another strike. Thus, Qinshi raised his right hand and prepared to strike again. However, at this moment, the old man's voice rang out once more. The Jiang family has no intention of making you an enemy, so this array only has the effect of defense, and does not have the ability to kill. This child, Zhengqing, has been arrogant since he was young. It is inevitable that he would look down on the heroes of the world. I hope that you will not lower yourself to his level. Sir, the name Yamasaro has been passed down for a long time. I'm sure you have some experience in refining medicine. Now that rare treasures are hard to find, there are many people who want to refine a spiritual medicine, but cannot find the right ingredients. Recently, there happened to be a ginseng flower on Diyu Island that has reached 500 years of age. I thought of giving this flower to you as an apology to your father on behalf of Zhengqing. I hope that you will be magnanimous and forgive him this time. Ginseng flower? After hearing this, even Qinshi could not help but be stunned. A ginseng flower that had just reached 500 years of age. Ginseng flowers were very common in Heavenly Spiral, but the rare ones were those that were exactly 500 years old. A little is not enough, but a lot is more than enough. It was not too much, not too little. Who would have thought that Diyu Island would have such a rare treasure? Perhaps it was because he had not seen anything good in a long time, but Qinshi could not help but feel a little moved. However, after thinking about it, he still replied coldly, "Don't blame me for not showing mercy. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourself for being blind and hurting someone who should not have been hurt." After saying that, Qinshi continued to walk towards Jiang Zhengqing with his sword in hand. In reality, even if Qinshi had been injured, there was still room for negotiation for the sake of this ginseng flower. However, Jiang Zhengqing had injured Qin Yongyan. How could they continue the negotiation? There was no room for negotiation at all. Because Jiang Zhengqing's injuries were too severe, he was already in a semi-conscious state. He had no idea that death was slowly approaching him. Jiang Yuankui stood on the steps and was so anxious that he wanted to call the police, but he did not dare to stop him. He was really afraid that if Qinshi was unhappy, he would cut him down as well. At such a critical juncture, it was obvious that only the old man whom he had never met before could stop Qinshi. Just as expected. Just as Qinshi was about to swing his sword, the old man's voice rang out unhurriedly. "Sir, you're actually here for your wife, right? The matter of Si Mingxian Nu involves the secrets of our clan. It should not be mentioned to outsiders. If you're willing to let Zhengqing live, I promise to tell you everything I know." Chapter 357. What do you think? Although Diyu Island was the Jiang clan's territory, the old man was very humble, as if he was really afraid of Qinshi. Seeing that the old man's attitude was so proper, Qinshi stopped and began to think after listening to his words. At that moment, Qin Ruoying suddenly called out to him. "She." It was just a simple word, but Qinshi immediately understood what she meant. Yingying was advising him to be lenient. After all, their family was not the dragon of Kunshan, nor were they wolves, tigers, or leopards. Naturally, they would not let the Jiang clan go bankrupt because of this. It was about time. Of course, he had to listen to his wife. However, Qinshi already had a plan in mind, so he pretended to be hesitant. Qinshi did not say anything, so naturally, no one dared to say anything either. The dilapidated square was deathly silent. Jiang Yuankui looked at Qinshi nervously, feeling as if his heart was about to jump out of his throat. How could there be such a terrifying person in this world? Not only Su Feng, but even second granduncle could not take a single blow from him. Could it be that this person came from the sky? Thinking of this, Jiang Yuankui could not help but look up at the cloud vortex in the sky. The golden light was still dazzling. However, he felt a chill in his heart for no reason. Could it be the prophecy left by the ancestor really came true one day? As people often say, sometimes it is not good to know too much. Being muddle-headed is the true meaning of life. Jiang Yuankui was clearly such an example. He looked at Qinshi's back, but his mind was filled with distracting thoughts. After an unknown period of time, Qinshi's voice brought Jiang Yuankui back to reality. "All right, then I will let him live. I hope you don't disappoint me." After saying this, Qinshi suddenly waved his sleeve, and an invisible force swept up Jiang Zhengqing, then threw him directly to Jiang Yuankui. After Jiang Yuankui hurriedly caught Jiang Zhengqing, the old man's voice sounded again. "That's great. Please move to Heron Island, Mr. Qin. Yuankui, lead the way for Mr." The so-called Egret Island was actually the smallest of the 17 islands. At the same time, it was also the Jiang clan's forbidden area. Ordinary people were not allowed to enter. Under Jiang Yuankui's guidance, Qinshi's family of 3 took a small boat to Heron Island. Apart from Jiang Yuankuei, there was also the cold-faced woman from before. After Jiang Yuankuei's introduction, Qinshi found out that this woman was actually the Jiang clan's Siming Xiannu, Jiang Yuanqing. Since Jiang Yuanqing was of the same generation as Jiang Yuankuei, his age would naturally not be that young. Xiannu of the 10,000 Holy Valley would automatically step down from her position at the age of 30. Jiang Yuanqing, a middle-aged Xiannu woman, was able to sit firmly in the position of Xiannu's high priestess. His attention was attracted by an item placed on the table. There was a soul crystal on the table. Furthermore, this soul crystal was even larger than Qinxi's soul crystal. A little interesting. Qinshi smiled and shook his head. Then he sat down on the armchair. After taking a seat, he looked at the soul crystals on the table and slowly said, "I really didn't think that someone would be able to form a nascent soul under such harsh conditions. That's quite impressive. Sir, you flatter me." As soon as he finished speaking, the old man's voice suddenly rang out in the room. And the source of the voice, it was none other than the soul crystal on the counter. Qinshi did not find this strange at all. Instead, he looked at the portrait on the table with interest. Then he smiled and asked, "Is that you?" "That's me. You were quite handsome when you were young." "Ha!" The conversation came to an abrupt end. The room suddenly quieted down. It was so quiet that the sound of the wind outside could be heard. It seemed that no one wanted to speak again. In fact, since the first time Qinshi saw this soul crystal, he understood why the old man always gave in to him. Diviners were only pseudo-cores. Only those who were above diviners could be called golden cores. So far, among all the people Qinshi had met, except for Bai Hong's group who came down from the heavenly gate, this old man who hid Yuanying in the soul crystal in front of him had the highest cultivation. When the forest was big, there would naturally be all kinds of birds. So the only thing that surprised Qinshi was that this old man did not even have a body, but he still had to rely on the soul crystal to survive. How many years had he lived? 500 years? Or 1,000 years? In any case, he had lived longer than Qinshi. Chapter 358. Looking at the soul crystal in front of him, Qinshi could not help but put himself in the old man's shoes. If it had been him, he should not be living in this way. It was obvious that the old man could no longer be reborn, so he could only put his Yuanying in the soul crystal, and then rely on the soul crystal to barely maintain the state of his divine soul. Just like the remnant soul of the Azure Dragon in the Sundial Brilliance Temple. But what was the point of this? Without a body, the soul crystal was just a cage in disguise. If one could live for 10 or 20 more years, they might feel that they had profited, but if they really stayed in it for hundreds or even thousands of years, it was a little scary just thinking about it. One had to know that although the divine soul could perceive the outside world in the soul crystal, the feeling was completely different from that of ordinary people. It was probably somewhat similar to a sixth sense. For the old man, it was like being in a world of chaos that had not yet been opened. He could not directly see the outside world, but he could clearly perceive any subtle movements in the outside world. Struggling at death's door in the gap between two worlds, the loneliness brought about by drifting away from reality was actually a kind of torture and punishment that ordinary people could not bear at all. Therefore, Qinshi could not help but sigh from the bottom of his heart. This old man was also a ruthless person. Qinshi silently looked at the portrait on the wall. After a long while, he took the lead to break the silence. "Well, I don't have as much time as you, so don't waste time here. Looking at your age, you should know a lot of things. Let's talk. I'm very interested in the matters of ancient cultivators. Why don't we start talking about it?" Qinshi opened the conversation. But the old man did not immediately answer after hearing it, but instead laughed. Although his expression could not be seen, the laughter gave Qinshi a strange feeling. That feeling. It was somewhat like the young man and wise old man who often appeared in jokes. The young man asked the old man to answer his questions, but the old man smiled and did not say anything, but instead put on a posture of having seen through the world of mortals, and understood the true meaning of life. In this regard, Chunxi's reaction was completely different from that of the young man in the joke. Keeping me in suspense, right? Alright, take your time. I'm going to kill that guy. As soon as he finished speaking, Chunxi stood up and pretended to leave. His unconventional behavior immediately threw the old man into disarray. He had no choice but to shout anxiously, "Sir, please wait." It really gave birth to a feeling of looking through history, magnificent and magnificent. It could be said to be soul-stirring. However, although the story was good, Chunxi didn't forget the purpose of this trip. The little fellow didn't understand what they were talking about, but she could clearly feel that her mother was angry, so she imitated Qin Ruoying, raised her head and said in a coquettish voice, "What nonsense are you talking about?" Well, the eldest and the second in the family were furious. Chunxi had to immediately raise his hands to surrender and apologize. Okay, I'm talking nonsense. Ying, don't be angry. And you, why are you making a fuss? I'm not making a fuss. Hearing this, the little fellow immediately pouted and retorted with dissatisfaction. It's Papa's disobedience that made Mama angry. I'm so obedient, Mama won't be angry with me. Okay, you're the most obedient. Come, let Daddy kiss you. No, I'm angry. After saying that, the little fellow immediately turned her head to the side and refused to let Chunxi kiss her no matter what. One wanted to kiss, the other wanted to block. Looking at the noisy father and daughter, Qin Ruoying couldn't help but smile. And then she leaned her head on Chunxi's shoulder again. In fact, she knew what Chunxi was worried about. But for her, instead of deliberately preparing for a rainy day, it was better to live in the moment calmly. People often have thousands of thoughts about the future, but they forget to calm down and appreciate the present moment. The future days. Of course. When it was Wenwen's self-introduction, he actually said, my name is Xia Ming. When he heard this, he corrected him. Xia, don't believe him. He's Xiaowen. Xia Ming. You. My Xia. The older brother instinctively retorted. Then, as if he suddenly came back to his senses, he couldn't help but mumble weakly. No. I'm Xiaowen, he's Xia Ming. The twins were extremely eye-catching wherever they went. When the two brothers made such a scene, all the parents present were immediately amused and laughed. The other children looked at them in confusion. They really didn't understand what was going on. How could two people in this world look exactly the same? Everyone looked at the brothers curiously. The differences in the brothers' personalities were completely on display here. The older brother, who had always been shrewd and never let himself be taken advantage of, was now blushing like a monkey's butt. The younger brother, who had always been simple and honest, was not at all timid in the face of everyone's stares. Instead, he was complaining that his older brother was using his identity. The two brothers were like two pistachios, immediately making everyone laugh out loud. Just like that, Chunxi led the three children into the capital city's second-generation circle, and the curtain slowly began on the three children's school days. After all, kindergarten life was quite relaxing. Perhaps because of the brothers' company, the little girl didn't cry from beginning to end. Sometimes, she even took the initiative to say that she wanted to go to kindergarten. Chun-Shi said that the little girl would take the school bus by herself, but when it was time to go to school, he still personally picked her up and sent her to school every day. At the same time, he also instructed Big Cat to wait outside the kindergarten gate at all times. From this, it could be seen that he really cared for Nian Nian to the extreme. When life was on the right track, time seemed to pass much faster. In the blink of an eye, it was National Day again. It was cold in the north, and at this time, people all wrapped up their jackets. There was no military parade this year, so naturally, there were fewer tourists in Shangjing than in previous years. It was still the large courtyard, but compared to the desolation of previous years, the Qin family's courtyard was particularly lively this year. Early in the morning, Gu Lao took the brothers to the courtyard. Xiao Yuan was busy moving out all the tables and chairs in the house, while her sister-in-law and Qin Yongyan sat in the main hall to discuss their own understanding. Even Qin Ruoying, who hadn't shown up for a long time today, she finally got Chun-Shi's permission to make an exception and take a day off. In fact, since the family of three returned from Daiyu Island, Qin Ruoying became the one who worked the hardest. She was cultivating in seclusion almost all the time. Chapter 365. Above the sky, amidst the dark clouds, Chun-Shi silently sensed all the tiny movements around him. A massive spirit energy tide that he had never seen or heard of before was surging wantonly in front of his eyes. It was only at this moment that Chun-Shi suddenly realized the area covered by this rain was too large. If one stood on the moon and looked at the earth, they could clearly see the entire northeastern hemisphere was shrouded in huge cloud cyclones one after another. From the Malay archipelago in the south to Siberia in the north, almost half of Asia was covered by these huge cloud cyclones. The center of each cyclone was the place with the densest spirit energy. At a rough count, there were at least 7 or 8 cyclones. There was one in Shangjing, one in Qinling, one in Donghai, one in Karakoram, one in Taklamakan. Everywhere that had appeared before, a spirit energy tide appeared at the same time today. In other words, if the divine gate suddenly opened, it would definitely appear in these places. Usually it would come one by one, but today, so many appeared at the same time. What was the secret behind it? Chun-Shi didn't know, and he was too lazy to think about it. Because at this moment, there was only one thought left in his mind, and that was completely block the divine gate. For Yingying, for Nian Nian, for their family of 3 to live a happy and stable life. Since opening the divine gate required a huge amount of spirit energy, then he wanted the spirit energy tide to never appear. From now on, he would be the dragon-breaking stone that stood between the two worlds. Wherever the spirit energy tide appeared, he would definitely be there. He wanted to completely cut off any connection between the two worlds. Disperse. This rain was not accompanied by lightning or thunder, but after Chun-Shi roared at the sky, a series of deafening rolling thunder suddenly sounded in the sky. Boom! In an instant, the sky was like an army of thousands of soldiers and horses facing the enemy. The sound of drums was endless and rumbling. With Chun-Shi as the center, a cyclone began to expand rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. Because it was spinning too fast, there were even white stripes visible to the naked eye on the inner wall of the cyclone. These stripes were like sharp blades, forming a meat grinder, enough to tear anything caught in the cyclone into pieces. The sky wailed, and the dark clouds roared in anger. Accompanied by the incessant flashes of lightning and rumbles of thunder, Chun-Shi was like a black hole, pulling in all the clouds and cyclones in the world and sucking them in bit by bit. This was the true power of the divine transformation stage. When Chun-Shi went all out, he could affect every corner of this planet. At this moment, he was like a Taotai from ancient times. He opened his mouth and crazily devoured the spiritual energy of heaven and earth on earth. After hearing this voice, Chinchi was a little confused for a moment, because this voice came out of nowhere, intermittent, and sounded a little strange, as if a voice changer was turned on, causing the voice to be distorted. However, Chinchi still understood this person's words. In this regard, Chinchi was unexpectedly mischievous. He imitated Feng Tangjing in the 9th grade Sesame official, and shouted towards the sky with a cheeky face. Not satisfied? Come and hit me, come and hit me. As he spoke, he twisted and turned in the air proudly. In fact, Chinchi wasn't sure if the other party could hear his ridicule. Since the other party couldn't pass through the void and directly pressed him to the ground and beat him up, then this person definitely couldn't be the Taiching sacred ancestor. This person's cultivation was probably about the same as his, but the other party had touched the threshold of the word void, so he could directly talk to him from the great world. You little thief. I'm so angry. Today, I swear that when the generals of Tiandu return, it will be the time to tear you into pieces. Remember this. Hearing this, Chenxi laughed disdainfully. Immediately after, he acted out of character and directly raised his middle finger towards the sky. At the same time, he didn't forget to ridicule. Remember this, my ass. Obviously, that person was so angry that he couldn't speak, so he could only let out a roar of anger and helplessness. However, at this moment, the last cloud cyclone completely dissipated. The tide of spirit chi receded. That person's voice stopped abruptly, as if it had never appeared. Everything returned to silence. Chenxi immediately withdrew the smile on his face. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.